Remember, for more information about New York City government services, dial 311 or visit nyc.gov.
This is Cecile Noel, Commissioner of the Mayor's Office to Combat Domestic Violence. If you're a survivor of domestic violence, sex trafficking, or elder abuse, the Mayor's Office is here to help. Walk into one of the city's family justice centers, located in every borough, to receive free and confidential help regardless of income, language, immigration status, gender identity, or sexual orientation. Call 311 and ask for the nearest Family Justice Center or visit nyc.gov/domestic violence.
Hello, this is New York City Public Advocate Letitia James. Every New Yorker deserves to live in a safe and decent home. But too often, residents are forced to live in dangerous conditions and face illegal harassment by their landlords. If you are having problems with your home or your landlord, please call my office at 212-669-7250 or email us at gethelp@pubadvocate.nyc.gov or call 311.
Remember, for more information about New York City government services, dial 311 or visit nyc.gov.
This is Donna Corrado, Commissioner of the New York City Department for the Aging. In this city, we look out for each other. We're our sisters and brothers keepers. During these cold weather months, I ask that you reach out to your elderly neighbors and friends. Remaining active, engaged, and socially connected improves one's quality of life. It also reduces the risk of chronic disease, dementia, and premature death. If you're lonely, anxious, or depressed, and you want help, call 1-888-NYC-WELL or 911 in an emergency.
Hi, I'm New York City Controller Scott Stringer. An honest day's work deserves an honest day's pay. And if you work for a city construction or building services contractor, you should be getting paid a prevailing wage. If you think you've been underpaid, call my Bureau of Labor Law at 212-669-4443. All calls will be kept confidential, and we'll fight to get you the money you're owed, regardless of immigration status.
Remember, for more information about New York City government services, dial 311.
Hello, this is Michael Carey, Executive Director of Citywide Event Coordination and Management.
Mayor, how are you? Welcome.
How's it going?
So far.
All right, I like it.
Kathy done? Yes, I sent it. Oh, okay. Good. How are you? Long time. Welcome back to office.
All right. How's your daughter? I'll keep you. Senator, good to see you. Try to be done. Try to be done. Okay. That's a cut. Okay, thank you. You should. You do. Yeah. Oh, this is it.
You're welcome. Okay. Yeah. hold it up. Okay. Okay, so the city's chair is Senator Felder.
That was nice.
Thank you.
And I think things well, thank you.
No, there is not.
Where does that fall?
Have a seat. I think it should be Senator Goldman. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, he's the city's chair, but maybe he won't show up. Okay. You know what? I can I don't mean to be rude. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know Elaine Kruger. How are you? And then because I just heard Kathy say it's Blasio and Goldman are the two chairs.
Okay.
I don't know. Is Marty Goldman coming, do you think? Or should Elaine take a seat?
Sit over there.
Actually, Senator Felder is chair of the city. Oh, Felder, not Goldman. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, Felder. Do you think he's coming?
I think he's planning on coming. Okay, so I'll leave this chair for him. Or I'll wait till he gets here and then move. I don't care. Maybe. Yeah, maybe. Are you on the committee though? Am I on the committee? Yeah. Okay. So we'll just go ahead and sit. That's fine. Member of the committee. If he comes in, good morning.
So I got an email from a friend asking who the senator was that Susan B. Anthony's house was within the district, and she told me it was you.
It wasn't her home. It was a relative, and they had a spice mill.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's in Albany. You can actually go in the barn and just smell the spices. And I can't remember. I should know my history better, but it was a relative. I don't know if it was a relative or cousin.
Because they were asking about whether there was going to be any state money to help, I guess, preserve it.
Oh. No one came to me. I'm interested.
She said it was her home, but maybe she got it wrong. Let's see if I can find it.
Okay.
It's true. Wherever you're going. It's true. That's promising.
Yes.
Elaine, what?
Thank you. You're very
Ask him if he
Great.
on his way. They called it what? You called it?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Today, we begin the third in a series of hearings conducted by the Joint Fiscal Committees of the Legislature regarding the Governor's proposed budget for fiscal year 2017-2018. The hearings are conducted pursuant to Article 7, Section 3 of the Constitution, and Article 2, Section 31 and 32A of the legislative law. Today, the Assembly Ways and Means Committee and the Senate Finance Committee will hear testimony concerning the budget proposal for local government, official general government. In the interest of time and fundamental fairness to the other witnesses who have been scheduled to speak, limits on the questions and overall time period will be implemented for the first witness, Mayor de Blasio. Any committee member in the seat in the room by 11:30 or after 11:30 will not be permitted to ask questions. For those of you that are upstairs in the chambers listening on TV, you must be down by 11:30. To ask a question of Mayor de Blasio. All questioning of the mayor will conclude at 1 p.m. Any additional questioning and photo opportunities should then be taken place outside of the hearing room to allow us to promptly continue with the next scheduled witness. I will now introduce members from the Assembly, and Senator Young, Chair of the Senate Finance Committee, will introduce members from the Senate. We have with us, I'm going to get as many as I can, and then we'll do it as I catch it later. Mr. Vrosik, Ms. Rosick, Mr. Assemblyman Mosley, Assemblyman Aubrey, Assemblyman Carroll, Assemblywoman Seawright, Assemblyman Benedetto, Assemblyman Weprin, Assemblyman Nolan, Assemblyman Cusick, Assemblyman Simmons, and Assembly Hooper. Those that I've missed, I'll catch later. Senator.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I'm delighted to be here today, and I welcome everyone for these proceedings. I am joined by several of my colleagues. I have Senator Diane Savino, Vice Chair of the Senate Finance Committee. Also, we are joined by Senator Simcha Felder, who serves as Chair of the Cities Committee, and also Senator Kathy Marchione, who is Chair of the Local Governments Committee. In addition to that, we also are joined by Senator Elaine Phillips, and I would turn things over to my colleague, who is the ranking member on finance, and that's Senator Liz Krueger, to introduce the members in her conference.
Good morning, everyone. I am also joined by my colleague, Senator Roxanne Persaud from Brooklyn, and Senator Daniel Squadron from Brooklyn and Manhattan. Thank you. Welcome.
Assemblyman Oaks.
Yes, we're also joined by Assemblywoman Maliatakis and Assemblyman Castorina.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome.
Ready to go?
Yep, go.
Okay, thank you. Well, I want to thank everyone, and particularly thank the chairs for the opportunity to be here today. Senator Young and Assemblymember Farrell, thank you for your leadership of this joint hearing, and I want to also thank your ranking members, Senator Krueger and Assemblyman Oaks. I want to say on behalf of the people of the city, I thank you to the legislative leadership across the board, to Speaker Hastie, Majority Leader Flanagan, Democratic Conference Leader Stewart Cousins, IDC Conference Leader Klein, Assembly Minority Leader Kolb, and all the members of the state legislature here and across the board. Thank you for your partnership and your support for the people in New York City. I want to thank two members of my team who will be joining me and will participate as warranted in the Q&A. Of course, you know them both. Dean Foulahan, our Director of New York City Office of Management and Budget, and Sharif Solomon, the city's Director for State Legislative Affairs. Want to say up front that the legislature has been a crucial partner, and that is important to all the work we do on behalf of the people of New York City. And of course, we are all in this together. New York City in all the ways that we attempt to contribute to the larger state of New York, and all the ways that the state of New York works with us. This is part of a continuum, and we see our role as continuing to be an economic engine for the state as a whole and for the region. And obviously, we are the state's primary gateway to the rest of the world, and we know we have to play that role well. I think it's fair to say that the city of New York can only reach its full potential with the support of the state of New York. I also think it's fair to say that New York State succeeds when New York City succeeds, and New York City succeeds when New York State succeeds. It's a truly symbiotic relationship. And at this moment, I can say, and I'm happy to report to you, that New York City is succeeding most clearly in the vein of economic growth. In the last 2 full years for which we have full information, 2014 and 2015, New York City created more jobs itself than all but 4 states in the country, and that helped push forward New York State's overall gains in terms of economic growth and job creation. And of course, New York City accounts for almost 43% of the state's total population, 46% of the state's jobs, and 60% of the state's tax revenue. So we are very happy to play those roles, but we also know we have profound challenges and issues we have to address in terms of our 8.5 million people. Examples are clear. 58% of New York State's Medicaid recipients live in New York City. 53% of the state's free and reduced price lunch students attend school in New York City. So we have some of the most powerful ways of contributing to the state. We also have some of the biggest challenges in the state. We're investing in our latest budget in the people of our city, but at the same time, we're demanding savings from our city agencies. We're setting aside unprecedented reserves, and we're spending within our means. Proud to say that just last week, one of the rating agencies, Moody's, noted that our, quote, diverse, vibrant economy drives growth needed to keep pace with fixed costs, and gave us a very positive review of our fiscal standing. Now, we have to continue our economic strength and our economic growth for the good of all. And we face a variety of challenges, but we are prepared to address them head on. We also know that we have to ensure for all of you that when we ask for state assistance, that we can show you we're getting the maximum impact from that state assistance and the maximum bang for the buck. Examples are clear. You, all the members of the legislature, played a crucial role in allowing us to build out our pre-K program. Now, 70,000 4-year-olds are enrolled in pre-K, and we're making sure that that investment pays off. And again, I want to offer my profound thanks on behalf of the parents of the City of New York for your support in allowing us to achieve this success. This is part of a bigger initiative called Equity and Excellence to fundamentally alter and improve our school system. And we've already seen results with higher graduation rates and higher test scores. And we believe those trends will continue because of these investments. So that's an example of state support that's having a real and tangible impact in a very efficient manner. I also want to say, in terms of affordable housing, we are ahead of schedule in our initiative to build and preserve 200,000 affordable apartments, enough for 500,000 people. Already, over the 3 years of this plan, 62,000 apartments have been either financed and built or preserved already. And that immediately is enough affordable housing for almost 200,000 New Yorkers. That is the most affordable apartments, particularly in the last year, the most affordable apartments created or preserved in a single year since the time of, quarter century ago, that we've set a record for the last quarter century for the pace of that production. Finally, I want to note, in the vein of impact, that your support has been part of our ongoing effort to make the City of New York the safest big city in America. We're proud to say that the numbers have come in for 2016, and once again, we've seen a reduction in crime across the board in New York City, while we've improved the relationship between police and community through our neighborhood policing initiative. Another example of investments that have consistently paid off. Now, we're going to continue our efforts to keep our city's economy vibrant and strong, and this is consistent in the fiscal 18 preliminary budget that I presented last week. A few examples I want to offer you. We obviously know that for our continued efforts on public safety to succeed, we need to keep training and equipping our police officers more effectively. So we're investing $10 million to install bullet-resistant windows in every NYPD patrol car. We know the city succeeds when people can afford to be there, and we know we have a particular obligation to those residents who live in public housing, over 400,000 New Yorkers. And we have to provide them safe and secure housing. The City of New York has made a commitment to invest $1 billion over the next 10 years to fix the roofs at 729 NYCHA buildings that have been found to have leaks that cause health problems for the residents. This will allow us to reach literally all of the buildings that have serious roof problems causing health concerns for residents. We know we succeed when our students have the right environment to learn in and are not subjected to overcrowding, and we know overcrowding has been a particular concern for members of the Senate, the Assembly from New York City. So we're tackling the problem head on by investing an additional $495 million to build 38,000 new school seats, part of the next 5-year plan. That total cost will be $4.6 billion. But again, by creating 38,000 new school seats, we will substantially address overcrowding issues. Finally, we know that investment in infrastructure is absolutely necessary to sustain economic growth. So we're fully funding $303 million worth of construction on the Brooklyn and Queens stretch of the third water tunnel. Nothing more important, obviously, than providing clean and safe water to our residents and having redundancy against all potential challenges. Third water tunnel, the foundation is built, meaning the tunnel itself is in place. It will be filled by the end of this year with water, will be operational and available, redundancy in the event of emergency, and then the additional work to add shafts and other elements will be done with the $303 million. So when it comes to what we're able to do with our resources and with your support, we feel confident about the progress we're making. But where we feel real uncertainty is on the federal front. And we know that those uncertainties are sharp and profound. Already, of course, we've seen new policies that lead us to be very concerned about their impact on the people of New York City. Just last week, of course, the executive order on immigration, which has raised a host of concerns and which I believe fundamentally runs contrary to the values in New York City. We believe we will be on a firm legal footing to challenge it, and will do so as needed. But this is only a beginning. The great concern we have ahead, of course, is on the budgetary front. What will the impact of proposals from the Trump administration and Republican Congress be in terms of potential cut to services and funding that the federal government currently provides? This is a great unknown that will have a huge impact on not only the city budget, but of course on the state budget that you're debating right now. One crucial example that we all are concerned about, we do not know what direction efforts to repeal the Affordable Care Act will take. ACA now covers 1.6 million New York City residents. Changes to the Affordable Care Act or cuts to Medicaid would have an enormous impact on both the well-being of our people and on our ability to fund our public hospital system, our Health and Hospitals Corporation. Out of the 1.2 million patients who depend upon our public hospital system, 30% are currently uninsured and 45% are on Medicaid. Should the ACA be repealed, we believe that up to 200,000 of our public hospital patients could lose their insurance, not only endangering their health, but potentially costing our public hospital system hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. So we're quite clear that any actions taken in Washington could create real pain for both state and city government. And that's why it's so important that we ask your support in making sure that the state budget insulates and protects local governments and our work, given these great uncertainties. I want to comment briefly on the state executive budget, where we certainly see some very good news, but also some areas of concern. In terms of education, the City of New York certainly appreciates deeply that the new Excelsior Scholarship Program, when added to existing tuition assistance programs, promises to further ease tuition costs for low and middle income students in our state. We're also gratified to see continued support for the DREAM Act, which is particularly important at this moment in history. The executive budget continues the commitment to cap local Medicaid costs and assumes control of Medicaid administration. We certainly appreciate and support that. This will save the City of New York $130 million. We appreciate this commitment, and we know that the city can assist the state in Medicaid reimbursements without the specific $50 million New York City mandate that was added in this budget. There's a 3-year extension of mayoral control in the executive budget. I think it's fair to say that educators, business leaders, and civic leaders alike have called for a multi-year renewal. There's a strong and bipartisan consensus on this, and let's resolve to address this issue right away through the budget process. I'm obviously pleased to see election reform in the executive budget. I want to thank the Assembly for passing an election reform package last year, including early voting, which is absolutely necessary given the realities of modern lives and people's schedule. Early voting and same-day registration are fundamental reforms we need to improve the democratic process. I continue to support Raise the Age and know we'll be a better and fairer state if we get this done. While we wait for legislative reform in this area, my administration has already made a commitment to move 16 and 17-year-olds off of Rikers Island. I'm also pleased the governor announced support for speedy trial reform. New Yorkers deserve their day in court, and the principles of fairness and justice demand that we ensure that day in court as expeditiously as possible. I'd like to commend Speaker Hastie for his leadership on this issue, as well as members of the Assembly Democratic Conference for championing these issues. I also support changes to our bail system that would reduce our reliance on money bail and would allow judges to consider whether a defendant poses a danger to the community when making bail determinations. New York City has expanded supervised release so that 3,300 individuals a year can be safely supervised in the community instead of being detained. Detaining those who actually pose a public safety risk and releasing those who can safely remain in the policy, doing both those things, is good public policy. And I look forward to working with you on these issues during the session. I now want to talk about the larger economic reality of our city and how this state budget affects us. We're still dealing with extraordinary challenges in terms of affordability in our city and income inequality that is widespread. This is a problem everywhere. I think everyone was struck by the recent Oxfam report that made clear that 8 individuals possess as much wealth as 1/2 of the residents of this globe. And we also know that the wealthiest among us have every reason to expect a major new tax break at the federal level, given the proposals already put forward by President Trump and the Congress. We think, in light of the fact that the wealthiest will be receiving a substantial federal tax break, that it's time that they pay their share in state and local taxes. So I join the Assembly majority's push to extend and deepen the millionaire's tax. This is critical to all that we are trying to do to improve our economy and support our people. For similar reasons, I believe the time is now right to enact a mansion tax for New York City high-value home sales. That means homes that start with a sales price of $2 million or higher. The people who would be affected can certainly afford this additional tax, and the revenue would be used to keep 25,000 senior citizens in their home at an affordable level. So this would be an additional 25,000 senior citizens who would get affordable housing as a result of this proposal. Moreover, in this uncertain federal climate, Identifying local revenue sources for affordable housing preservation is paramount. I think it's fair to say one of the areas most threatened by potential federal budget cuts is affordable housing, public housing, Section 8, all the things that so many of our residents in New York City and across the state depend on to be able to afford to live. Now, a few areas of concern that the City of New York has with the state executive budget. First, we're concerned about the 421A tax abatement program. We worked hard with so many of you to eliminate the old and broken version of the 421A program, which subsidized luxury housing without enough affordable housing in return. We advanced a proposal in 2015 that set forth some clear principles for what 421A should look like. One, more affordability per city tax dollar spent. It's a matter of fairness to our taxpayers. Two, that we could no longer subsidize luxury housing. And three, that if a developer got a tax exemption anywhere in New York City, they had to provide affordable housing in return. Those were the core principles. The state's current proposal represents a departure from these principles. To illustrate, if the old broken 421A program was extended, the per unit subsidy would have been $614,000 and likely would have produced only 12,400 affordable apartments over 10 years. By contrast, our proposal from 2015 had a per unit subsidy of $421,700 and would have produced almost twice as much affordable housing, 25,500 affordable apartments, enough on average for over 75,000 New Yorkers. In other words, it meant fewer taxpayer dollars spent for each apartment and more affordable housing created. Now, the state's current proposal, the per unit subsidy would be $544,300 and produce 21,750 affordable apartments over 10 years. In other words, more than $100,000 per unit above the cost of our proposal with less affordable housing. Now, we're concerned by the additional costs imposed by the state's current proposal, but we obviously look forward to a conversation on how we can work together. That being said, we're even more concerned with the potential expansion of any condominium program as negotiations proceed. And we're concerned that we not creep back in the direction of the old and broken system. We are particularly adamant that we cannot support a plan that reverts back to subsidizing luxury condominiums. Costs will balloon in that instance without improving affordability, which is the core objective of the program. And we'd have to ask at that point whether we were repeating the mistakes of the past and spending taxpayer dollars to subsidize luxury housing, which I think it's fair to say our taxpayers would not approve of. A second area of concern is education. There appears to be an effort to eliminate the state's commitment to fully fund the shortfall in aid owed to high-need school districts all over the state of New York. Now, almost a decade ago, the state charted a course of reform in how school aid was allocated. After lawsuits, a study commission, financial crisis, and many budgets later, this vital commitment has yet to be completely fulfilled. The state must continue its commitment to funding the campaign for fiscal equity settlement. Now, the city's doing its part. Since 2008, the city's share of education spending has increased from 49% to 57%, while the state share has declined from 41% to 37%. The state shortfall is currently $1.6 billion. We are doing our part to provide equitable funding to our schools, but we need the state's partnership, and we need the state to do more. When I came into office, many schools were at just 81% of the fair student funding level, and the citywide average was 88%. Over 2 years, with your help, with the help of state assistance, we increased the citywide average to 91%, with no school below 87% of the formula. All, by the way, all of our community and renewal schools are at 100% of their fair student funding level. Now, if the state provides a similar increase in education aid as it did over the last 2 years, We intend to go to a citywide average of 92.5% with no school below 90% next year. And with the state's continuation of the commitment to CFE, the city is committed to raising all schools to a minimum of 100% by fiscal '21. On another front, the state is proposing a much-needed consolidation in the administration of grant funding for pre-K. We support the goals of streamlining to address the administrative burden on school districts that come with complying with separate funding structures, standards, and reporting requirements. However, the proposal also plans to cut the per-seat rate at a cost of $34 million, or the equivalent of 3,400 pre-K seats in New York City. The state has made a giant leap forward over the last years in supporting pre-K. But this proposal and this proposed cut is a leap backwards and counter to all the progress that we've made with your partnership in ensuring that 70,000 4-year-olds had full-day, high-quality pre-K. This rate cut should not go forward. Additionally, the state is proposing to increase and shift charter school costs it has been paying previously. The proposal strips state support away from charter schools and transfer the costs to school districts abruptly and to an exorbitant degree. For New York City alone, this would mean $198 million less funding for our schools. If the state chooses to enact this increase in funding for charter schools, then it should cover the costs and fund it separately from our basic school aid, as it has for the past 4 years. The executive budget also removes the geographic cap on charter schools in New York City. Now, the legislature recently raised the cap, and there are currently 30 charters available for New York City, in addition to 29 schools already approved to open. This is ample, and there is no need to raise the cap at this time. Third, there are several cuts in the state executive budget that are going to have an effect on thousands and thousands of New Yorkers. These cuts include, first of all, a $32.5 million cut through fiscal 18 for public health programs, chipping away at a long history of state partnership in health funding areas, including disease control and emergency preparedness, particularly related to our efforts against Zika, maternal and child health programs such as newborn home visiting program, HIV prevention activities, school-based health services, naloxone education and distribution to address the opioid crisis, and public health campaigns on anti-smoking and obesity-related illnesses. There is a cut of almost $66 million through fiscal 18 with a shift of state costs for the education and care provided to 8,900 foster care youth. There's a cut of $25.5 million through fiscal 18 through the redirection of senior center funding, affecting 65 neighborhood programs for seniors, serving over 6,000 seniors per day. And there's a cut of almost $30 million through fiscal 18 with the elimination of the state share in funding services for more than 800 special education students who have highly specialized needs. These are key areas of need for the city that the budget does not address. A couple more points. I want to say we must all together note the glaring and inexplicable omission of New York City in the design-build authorization in the budget. The executive budget extends and expands design-build for state agencies, state authorities, and counties outside of New York City. According to a 2016 report by the Empire State Development Corporation, which evaluated projects in New York State, design-build accelerated dozens of projects and saved taxpayers billions of dollars. If the city also had access to this tool, similar benefits would be realized. Our capital agencies have identified $7.3 billion in projects with around $450 million in immediate savings for our taxpayers. If the rest of New York State has access to design-build, New York City certainly should as well, as a matter of common sense. Now, I'd like to discuss for just a moment the homeless crisis facing New York City. And I want to be clear up front, my administration is fundamentally dissatisfied with the current homelessness situation in our city. Next month, we'll be announcing a new comprehensive vision for addressing it. Homelessness has been a growing problem in our city for decades and only got worse in the years since 2011 when the Advantage rental assistance program was canceled. There's much more to do, and we have made meaningful progress, however, over the last 3 years. Without our new initiatives, we project instead of the 60,000 plus people who are in shelter now, that number would be over 70,000. We have evidence that some of our initiatives are working more consistently, including the fact that our anti-eviction legal services program has helped to reduce evictions by 24% since 2013. We know our new Homestead initiative, the most comprehensive program to address street homelessness anywhere in the United States, which began last year, has already brought 690 individuals off the streets and into safer surroundings where they can get support. Of course, the best way to address homelessness is to prevent it from happening in the first place. And that's why I'm pleased to support Assemblyman Andrew Hevesey's Home Stability Support proposal, which deserves serious consideration in this budget process. Home Stability Support would create a statewide, primarily state and federally funded rental subsidy program designed to keep people in their homes and out of shelter. It recognizes the state's responsibility in providing rental assistance and provides an option to local governments to go even farther in their own efforts. And I will tell you right now, rest assured that New York City will do its share if this initiative is passed. I look forward to working with all of you and Assemblyman Hevesey to ensure the final product is one that can have an immediate impact on people's lives while not imposing an unfunded mandate on local governments. Now, I want to turn for a moment to the Memorandum of Understanding on Housing that would unlock $2 billion in housing funding authorized in last year's state budget. Housing is the single biggest expense for our residents, and we welcome additional affordable homes financed by the state as we continue to work together to meet the needs of so many New Yorkers who are one paycheck away from not being able to afford their rent or their mortgage. Negotiating and signing the MOU is also critical because it would facilitate production of supportive housing units that offer residents apartments and services, keep their lives on track, and help us to fundamentally address the problem of homelessness. My administration announced a commitment to fund 15,000 apartments for supportive housing over the next 15 years, the largest commitment ever made by the City of New York. We've budgeted necessary resources, and our first 550 apartments will be available this year for people in need. Over the next 5 years, New York City will produce 4,000 apartments that will address the needs of our most vulnerable residents and have a direct impact on reducing our shelter population. But we have a related concern when it comes to public housing. While the city has made a very substantial commitment to capital improvements for public housing, as I mentioned, $1 billion committed to fix the roofs in over 700 buildings, the current total from the state falls short. And we ask your assistance in providing help to the 400,000 people who live in public housing. I want to take a moment to thank Speaker Hastie and the Assembly Democratic Conference for fighting to add to that funding. As I wrap up, I want to underscore the importance of partnering with you and with all community leaders to address the housing crisis. As I said in February, I present a comprehensive vision related to homelessness. And one thing that we will do as part of that vision is address a concern that many of you have raised about community notification. We will include a community notification process for you and for community leaders that will be implemented immediately upon the announcement next month. And post-notification will proceed with meaningful community engagement, one that facilitates dialogue between city officials, elected officials, and community leaders, ensuring there's a clear framework and timeline for any shelter opening, and making sure that we're connecting shelter residents to their schools and jobs and community supports they need while addressing concerns of neighborhood residents at the same time. I want to conclude my testimony by reflecting on how much of our work, all of our work, is happening under clouds of uncertainty. As a result of the new administration in Washington, we all must live with the possibility that many things will change, and very much in unexpected ways. I think the events of the last 48 hours certainly illustrate that. I can assure you that no matter what happens in Washington, New York City will do its part to remain a growing and vibrant economic anchor for our region and our state. But in the face of this unprecedented uncertainty from the federal level, your partnership is more important than ever. And now, more than ever, it is important to remember a simple truth in terms of the relationship between New York City and New York State. We are all in this together. Thank you, chairs, for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you. We've been joined by Assemblywoman Wright, Assemblywoman Wallace, Pfeiffer Amato, Assemblywoman Richardson, and Assemblywoman Bouchard, Assemblyman Wright, and that's Assemblywoman Wright. Assemblyman Braunstein, and Assemblyman David Buckwall.
We've also been joined by Assemblyman Saladino.
Thank you very much. And we've also been joined by Senator Golden, Senator Hamilton, Senator Sanders, and Senator Hoylman.
And to question Michael Benedetto, Chair of the City's.
Thank you, Denny. Good morning, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for being here. Always a pleasure. I have 3 questions. I'll try to ask them quickly, and I hope we can get a quick answer so I can get them in. You mentioned that you want design build to be part of New York City, and I tend to agree with you. However, some of the problems we had with design build was allaying the fears of women, minority-owned businesses, labor unions. Could you tell me about your efforts in those areas and what you have done to improve our chances of getting
Simple,
this bill
fast
passed?
answer. We've made a clear 30% commitment in terms of MWBEs for all contracting. We're going to need your help with some of the legislative elements that would help us to speed that effort. But the City of New York is now committed to a 30% goal in all contracting for MWBEs. In terms of labor, as I think you've seen, Assemblyman, we have signed PLAs with labor unions, for example, for public housing that are unprecedented, and prove that we can create a very positive cooperative framework for labor having the substantial core role in so much of the work we do. We'd like to see that continue across everything we do. So I think those are examples of the direction we're ready to take. The bottom line on design build is it will allow for much faster projects and huge savings, which will not only allow for fairness for taxpayers, but it'll help us to do even more. And you know how immense our infrastructure problems are in New York City. So while we're waiting to see what happens in Washington, and as we know, there's a tremendous uncertainty, one thing that would help us right now to use our own resources more effectively is design build.
Thank you. Let's hope we get there. New York City passed, Mr. Mayor, a tax, you call it a fee, on plastic bags, okay? And while we understand the environmental concerns and the reasons for it, we, at least many of us in the Assembly, have concerns with that and the cost it's going to be for some of the people who are rather challenged financially in the city of New York. We would like to see possibly a postponement in that bag tax so we can have hearings on it, possibly develop an alternative recycling program just for such plastic bags that could be good for the environment and also save our citizens in the city of New York this nickel tax. Your views, sir?
Assemblyman, you know we share a common understanding that a lot of people in our city are hurting economically and struggling to make ends meet. I would never belittle that challenge. But at the same time, we all face the immense challenge of an earth in crisis because of climate change and environmental degradation. We have to stop taking plastic bags made with petroleum products, so the right there, fossil fuels hurting our environment, exaggerating climate change further because it's fossil fuels being used, and then adding to our landfills, which is bad for the earth and costs taxpayers money. This is the right thing to do to break with the status quo that we're in right now. Plastic bags no longer have a place in our lives. I would not, I absolutely respect your question, but I would not encourage delay. We've made clear that we believe with education efforts and with a concerted effort to provide consumers with permanent bags that they can bring to markets, as our ancestors did long before there were plastic bags, we think that can solve the problem. And the City Council initiated this concept, but I was happy to sign the bill because I think it's about protecting the earth. So we believe we can get to the core of your concern, that folks of limited means not end up paying more than they can afford by giving them the tool that will allow them to go about their shopping with no additional cost.
Has anything been looked into as a possible recycling program just for such plastic bags? Because bags we get from the dry cleaners, for instance, bags that are given on takeout foods, they're not going to be included on this. So we're still going to have this problem. But if you do have a recycling plan for those type, maybe we can suit both ends.
I appreciate the thought, and I've been down this road on other issues like styrofoam. I think we have to get away from the use of fossil fuels, period. I think we all know, maybe there are some in Washington who deny climate change, but I think in general in the state of New York, it's fair to say New York State and New York City have been leaders in addressing climate change, and we don't have any time to waste. So any product made, any petroleum-based product is a problem unto itself. We have to get away from it. Recycling doesn't solve the problem sufficiently. I think if you knew that all of your constituents would have an opportunity to have a bag they could use on a regular basis that did not require plastic bags any longer, and they could go about their lives and without that additional cost, you'd feel comfortable. That's exactly what we want to achieve between public education and providing the maximum number of permanent bags. Take that economic burden off people, but take, most importantly, the burden off the earth that threatens us all.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You have proposed, I believe, $275 million in the budget for the police firing range down at Rodman's Neck in the Bronx. And we thank you for that because it's certainly well needed, but what have you done to address the concerns of many of us who are worried about the pollution, lead pollution that's going into the water and has been, and possibly avoiding lawsuits about federal regulations about water pollution?
I'll start, and I just will say, as with any answer, if my colleagues want to add some specificity, I'm sure they'll jump in. Bottom line vision for the investment at Rodman's Neck. We have a facility for our police officers that is absolutely essential for their ability to use their firearms properly. It is outmoded. We need to improve firearms training for all reasons, starting with the terror threat, and this is where we'll do more and more effective active shooter scenarios for our officers, which literally is about stopping any act of terror in progress and protecting both our residents and our officers alike. These are scenarios also that will help in everyday policing in terms of the ongoing effort to de-escalate confrontations and to reduce the use of firearms to the maximum extent possible. This training is quintessential to all we have to do for our city. An improved Rodman's Neck facility will allow us to do it. Now, there's been two concerns that have to be addressed. One, the noise concern of City Island and surrounding areas. This will allow us to do that. Two, the pollution concern. As we modernize the facility, it gives us a chance to address that concern head on. So I will be able to have our team get you details of it, but the notion here is that the additional work we'll do at Rodman's Neck will allow us to not see any of the residue seep from the activities seep into the water. This is an environmental upgrade as well as a sound upgrade.
There are many in the area who, while they applaud your attention, might not be satisfied fully with that. Lastly,
that sounds like all New Yorkers, Assemblyman.
Yes, and speaking of not being satisfied, and at the risk of having a few on the panel here rolling their eyes, I must direct your attention to the great city of Co-op. Co-op City, with close to 50,000 people in it, have many concerns. I have asked you about numerous concerns in regards to the people in Co-op City, and I get basically a Reagan era motto, just say no. Can you give me any hope for the residents of Co-op City?
We don't tend to, I don't hear a lot of comparisons to Ronald Reagan, so this is a unique moment. But I know it's a compliment. No, we're having a meeting next week with leaders of Co-op City to try and address a number of outstanding issues, the asbestos issue and other issues. I know Co-op City is one of the foundations of affordable housing in New York City. Spent a lot of time there. I think the resident concerns are real and honest. We're still trying to find solutions. But there will be a delegation from Co-op City meeting with senior members of the administration. I'll be a part of that meeting as well. I believe it's next week.
Well, let's keep it affordable, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and welcome to Albany. And we certainly are appreciating the fact that you're here and that you're actively engaged with us. As chair of the Finance Committee, I have several questions that I will go over in a few minutes. But at this point, I'd like to cede my time to Senator Simcha Felder, who is the chair of the Cities Committee.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor.
Good morning,
Thank
Senator.
you for being here. Last year, on May 4th, you testified here before the Education Committee. You made a commitment then to the parents of special needs children to finally implement before the start of this school year 3-year IEPs for special needs students that require no changes to their IEPs. That never occurred. Although you did provide a letter to my office on May 13th, such policy was not implemented, and children and families are still suffering humiliation and financial hardship to maintain their IEPs by having to pay lawyers over and over and over again, despite the fact that there are no changes. So the example I gave last time is if a child is has Down syndrome, autism, there's no fix for that, unfortunately, and there's no need to force them to do this over and over again. September 6th of 2016, I requested a meeting in writing to discuss this critical issue and received no response. I called several times after September 6th, received no response. I wrote again on December 6th, still no response. Mayor, I'm not hurt or disturbed personally by your lack of response to me. In fact, many of my colleagues in government have told me of similar experiences regarding your office's inattentiveness, not being responsive. So I know that you share that same love with many of my colleagues as you do with me in not responding. But New Yorkers, and especially families with special needs children, are suffering, and they demand your response and require you to live up to your commitments. And I thank you for the strides and improvements that you've made, no question about that. But that doesn't give me or anyone else a pass on doing what we have to do to help these families. So I sincerely hope New Yorkers can count on your commitments in 2017.
Senator,
I didn't finish. Let's start fresh in 2017 and hope for the best. Now, shortly after you made those commitments, the City Council passed a controversial bag tax that was referred to by my colleague by, I think, a close vote, 28-20. And let me be clear. I think New Yorkers are tired of being insulted and lied to. The debate about the plastic bag tax, fee, charge, whatever you want to call it, has nothing to do with whether people care or don't care about the environment, or whether people care or don't care about climate change. That is not the issue. I don't believe there's anyone here that wants to hurt the environment. The issue is whether we have to be punitive every time that there is an issue. And that's the way things go regularly. If government doesn't have a way to fix something, no problem, tax. No problem, ticket. No problem, fine. So the bag tax was scheduled to be implemented this past October. There was a postponement. It's quite shocking to me, based on what the mayor just mentioned to the assembly member, why there would have been even a short postponement. But after, and it was supposed to be implemented in October, and instead it was postponed to February 15th. An overwhelming outcry of New Yorkers opposed being nickeled and dimed and fined, and my colleagues and I introduced legislation to stop it. It was passed in June. Then New York City delayed it to February 15th, and it was common knowledge at the time that a commitment was made to the Assembly by you and the New York City Council to use the 5-month intervening delay to make changes to the bag tax and possibly work towards a better solution to protect New Yorkers and the environment. Let's stop saying that the only way you can protect the environment or address climate change is by taxing people. Neither your office or the City Council tried at all to work out a solution or a compromise. Strangely, no media coverage, no publicity on the implementation of the bag tax or a compromise to be worked out. Nothing. Until late last fall, notices were mailed to local retailers telling them, guess what? The tax is going into effect February 15th. The commitment made to work on a solution was yet another commitment ignored. We're now about 2 weeks away from a crisis facing average New Yorkers. And, Mr. Mayor, I'm sure you're familiar with the saying, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. So my question, Mr. Mayor, is please set the record straight. What steps have you taken to eliminate, reform the onerous tax? And based on some of the comments you made earlier, it sounds like you don't want a postponement because you don't want to make any adjustments. Did your administration make any adjustments or attempts to approve this bill during the 5-month postponement that existed? I'm finished now.
Senator, I say this with deep respect, and we've known each other a long time and worked together a long time, but we just disagree very substantially on these matters. And I think it's respectful to be blunt about that disagreement. I fundamentally disagree that this is an issue that isn't urgent to address in terms of climate change. Our city, our state, our nation, we are so far behind right now where we need to be to protect our Earth, and it's going to have devastating impacts if we don't address it on all levels. And what we saw with Sandy is just an example of things to come. So we must do this, and we have now even more urgency because we don't know whether the federal government's going to take a step backwards on addressing climate change. So I don't think there's any contradiction in saying to you that this is an urgent matter, as are a host of other things that we are trying to do simultaneously to address climate change. Second, as I said to the Assemblyman, we believe that a combination of public education and providing consumers with bags that they can use addresses this issue. And that was true for generations and generations. Plastic bags, as a common part of our society, is a few decades old. I do not believe it's a matter of unfairness to people to work us all away from plastic bags. And I believe if people have permanent bags, they don't need a plastic bag, they're not paying anything, and those permanent bags will be provided for free. A lot of people have them already. So it is about changing, all of us have to change our behavior in a lot of ways to address this new reality, or it will endanger us and our children and our grandchildren. So I believe that we said that from the beginning. The City Council initiated this, as I said, but we believe they were working in the right direction. And the two pillars of educating people and providing them with an alternative are how you address this issue. So one thing I know for sure is the status quo is not acceptable. If we continue using petroleum-based products on a mass scale when we don't need them. We're only exacerbating climate change. We're a very big market in New York City. We have a very big impact on the world, and it's our job to do it differently. On the special education question, Senator, again, we've had this conversation before. I will only say my instruction to all of my employees, whether in the Albany office or City Hall, so when any member of the Senate Assembly have a concern, we need to be in dialogue with them immediately, whether it's a sit-down meeting, a phone call, a letter. I make that a priority, and I said in the beginning of my testimony, we appreciate all of the partnership we've had. If you believe there's a widespread belief among your colleagues that they are not given the proper communication, that's what you've heard. I've heard something very different from a lot of your colleagues. But if anyone here or any member of the Senate or Assembly feels they did not get the kind of response they deserve, I want to fix that. But the instruction's been given, and I have plenty of evidence of the instruction being followed. And I don't know what's happening in the specific case of the communication between your office and my office, and we will work to fix that. But I disagree with you fundamentally on how far we have come on special education. I agreed energetically with the vision of addressing the original problem of our parents having to litigate for services they already deserve. This was something I worked on as public advocate. I appreciate your leadership, and I think we all got to a very good place several years ago that actually started real change, and I've heard from numerous parents, unsolicited, how much change has occurred in their lives. And then you further, I think appropriately, raised the issue of locking in 3-year plans when there aren't any variations in the IEP or the programming to support the IEP, and I agreed to that, again, openly, energetically, and that is being implemented. Not all of it happens overnight, but it is being implemented. But I can tell you that we have specific evidence of moving consistently towards more and more cases being settled without litigation. That's the order I have given to our Department of Education, and we'll get you the chapter and verse on how that is moving. We also know there are some cases that are complex. That's a given. You said that too. I remember when you offered the point that you knew not every case was easy and that there would be cases where there would be a change in IEP or change in needs of a child year to year. But I agree with the vision you've laid out, and we are energetically implementing it. And I think there should be a battle of facts. I'm happy to have that battle of facts, and we will give you all of our information, chapter and verse, on what we're doing.
Well, first of all, I just want to address the chair. I know there's a time limit, but obviously the mayor didn't hear anything I said, because the first thing I said was that we're not debating whether to address climate change or whether to address the environment. The question is how to do it. That's the issue. Mr. Mayor, do you know how much a pound of bread costs today? Do you know how much a dozen eggs cost the regular family? Well, let me tell you, I was in this local shop a week ago, and a mother came in with a few children and put down whatever she wanted, and they did not have enough money, and the store owner said this was the price, and she had to put back sliced cheese. So again, the issue is not about protecting the environment. Everybody agrees. The crisis, you mentioned very clearly. I never said it shouldn't be given priority. You know, when I got into this business, somebody said, when they ask you questions that you don't want to answer, you answer whatever you want. You don't have to talk about what they asked you. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about regular New Yorkers and why the city has to be punitive all the time. It's just not fair. Every poll has shown that most New Yorkers oppose a tax. The question here now is not whether we have to do something about the environment. Everyone agrees, no matter how many times I say it, you say it, everybody else, we are not going to make this debate about whether the environment is or is not important. It is, period. How do you get it done? Why can't it be positive? Why don't you give a nickel back to New Yorkers for every bag they don't use? A nickel back for a change. Reward positive behavior. Implement the law that exists force store owners to do what they're supposed to do for the last 10 years, have recycling bins in front of the stores so that people can recycle it. What are we doing? We're not taking the nickel and putting it to protect the environment. We're giving the store owners another nickel profit. From who? From poor and middle-class New Yorkers. So that's not protecting. Recycle. We educate. Give them back a nickel. Give them reusable bags. And what about incentivizing businesses? Patagonia uses recycled plastic to make clothes. Trex use recycled bags to make synthetic lumber. Why can't New York City? You talked about a mansion tax before. This is a mansion credit for the 1%. The mayor always talks about the 99%. Well, let me tell you, this is a 99% tax on the 99%. It's a credit for the 1%, because the people who have limousines, chauffeurs, nannies are not dragging their groceries. They're getting them delivered or brought home by somebody else. It's irrational and it's punitive. The issue is not whether we want to do something or not do something. The issue is why New Yorkers have to be overtaxed, overfined, overticketed, and can't be treated like mature adults instead of like children who you decide you can't discipline any other way and smack them across the face over and over by charging them. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Felder.
Assemblyman Cusick.
Mr. Mayor?
I hope everybody is watching the clock.
I'm watching it right now, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for attending today. I'm just going to echo quickly what the two speakers before me said, the chairman of our city's committee. As you know, I'm the sponsor of the bill that companions Senator Felder's in the Assembly. For many of my constituents, it's just that they feel that rather than going to a tax first, that they wanted to see that there were other alternatives that we looked at, possibly recycling, if recycling was looked at. No one's more sensitive to the environmental issue than I am. I represent the area that used to have the world's largest garbage dump. I know the issues of climate change. I know the issues of what plastic bags do to our environment. But I think that many of us feel that there might be another way to do this, and we'd like to work with the city to come up with an alternative that will work for all New Yorkers.
Assemblyman, I know you care deeply about the environment, and I know you've seen the effects of climate change, and no place knows that better than Staten Island. We're always willing to work together. We feel urgency, and we feel that if you say recycling again, you're still talking about a petroleum-based product that'll be recycled by some people some of the time. You and I both know. Other times it won't be. So we're going to keep using something that ultimately is bad for the earth. And look, part of why cities and localities around the country turned to this approach is because we had to break out of a cycle that was harming us. And again, I'll tell you, when my grandmother came here from Italy, I'm sure she understood that she could go shopping without a plastic bag. And she did that for her whole life. So I'm not trying to be flip. I'm saying some of this is about learning some new habits. We're all learning smaller cars and more fuel-efficient cars. All sorts of other things are changing that are making us more able to protect the earth. But the notion is not to be punitive in the least. The notion is to just break us out of a habit, provide people with the alternative of a permanent bag, do the education we need to. I think it's the best way to address the problem. But if there's other good ideas, of course we're always willing to work together.
And I think what many of us are concerned about is that there is state law in effect that mandates supermarkets to have these bins accessible to people to recycle, and it's not being done, whether it's a city or a state. That's something that I know many of the members of the Assembly and Senate are looking into. I think that that's what we want to do, is work together to come up with, because people are exhausted. They're exhausted by constant fees, the fares, everything. And not that I'm putting that all on the city or you, Mr. Mayor. But the issue here is that they just want to know that there are other alternatives looked at before we went to a tax. And that's just what a lot of the folks are relaying to me. But again, I see my time is running out. I want to also talk, Mr. Mayor, ask you about the alternative exemption for property taxes for veterans. The New York State Legislature last year passed that would allow New York City to opt in what's happening throughout the state of New York. It would amend and extend the property tax exemption for veterans. The City Council could vote to allow this to happen. I know that it wasn't in your preliminary budget. I know there's a price tag to this. I wanted to see, is there a possibility that this is being discussed to be in your next stage of budget proposals?
Something we're definitely going to discuss it in the next phase. I thank you for supporting this proposal so strongly. You know, we've worked together on making sure there was property tax relief at times for veterans, and obviously we created in the city of New York our new Department of Veterans Services, and we've expanded a lot of what we're doing to serve our veterans. So I certainly appreciate this proposal. You're right, there are cost implications, other implications we have to look at. But this is something we very much look forward to working with you and the council on as we look ahead to the executive budget.
And I urge you to, if you could put it in the budget, it's very important. As you know, there are 250,000 veterans throughout New York City. This is much needed. Again, it goes to the cost of living in New York City, and it's something that's very important. And again, it now allows the city to opt in, and we would just like to see if in the city budget we could get the funding for it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator.
Thank you very much. Mayor, I have several questions, as I said, and you unveiled your city's preliminary budget, I believe, last week, and it continues to assume significant increases in property taxes. For example, you expect to receive $24.2 billion in the city fiscal year 17, which ends June 30th, from the general property tax, and $25.6 billion in 18, which is an increase of $1.4 billion, or 5.9%. We talk about affordability in New York City and the fact that homeowners and commercial property owners are suffocating in many ways, whether it's through the bag tax, whether it's through other fees, but also through property taxes. And as you know, on the state level, we have limited the growth of property taxes to 2% or less. And I was wondering what you're doing to address this issue, because obviously it's all tied together as far as the economy, as far as people having affordable housing, and building owners being able to stay in business and the whole thing. So could you please address that for us?
Yes, Madam Chair, first of all, I've made very clear now in the fourth budget that there will not be a property tax rate increase in New York City. As you know, this was something that was done under my predecessor. It's something I've been very clear I do not agree with, and we, 4 budgets running, not had a property tax rate increase. We're also trying to defray other costs for homeowners, reducing the rate of growth of water bills, and in fact trying to get a credit back for homeowners on water bills. And we're in court right now trying to move that program forward. So I'm a homeowner myself in Brooklyn. I certainly deeply feel the challenges that homeowners face. The rising assessments, as you know, as the value of real estate in New York City has gone up, have caused a number of homeowners to have to pay more. We have to look at the entire system, our entire property tax system. There's a number of issues that have to be addressed. I think that's going to be a very intensive multi-year process. It's one I'm committed to create a more transparent and consistent system. So in the meantime, my mission is to make sure that the rate doesn't go up. My mission is to see if we can reduce costs elsewhere, like the water bills, and reduce some of the unfair fines that homeowners have suffered from. We've reduced fines in a number of agencies, many of which were applied very arbitrarily. But I think the property tax dynamic is going to need a very full treatment to be addressed fairly.
Well, thank you for that. But as you point out, it's the assessments that are driving the revenues up, and it's a shell game, because you can say that I haven't increased the tax rate, and that's true, but the assessments continually go up and go through the roof. And you're talking about possibly revamping the tax system, but we had a lengthy conversation in this very room last year, and I was wondering when that's going to happen, because maybe you could fill us in on anything that you've done in the past year to change the tax system, because as far as I can tell, nothing has happened.
2 points, Madam Chair. On the first point, I respect you, and we've worked well together. I respectfully don't agree with your terminology. I was part of a city where property tax rates went up. I assure you, homeowners felt that deeply. It is a very different issue than assessments going up. Assessments were going up at the same time as that rate increase occurred, so people were hit by both. And homeowners will tell you, and I'll say as one myself, that not having property tax rate increase is a very important issue for everyday homeowners. But on the question of how we will go forward, I look forward to bringing a specific idea. This is something that is going to have to be very carefully constructed. It's going to have to be an approach that will maximize public input and transparency, but deal with an exceedingly, as you know better than anyone, exceedingly complicated issue of taxation, and trying to balance all of the different needs of all the different types of property owners. Again, a very difficult, intensive work. It's something I'm committed to doing, and we'll put forward a specific vision of how to do that.
Thank you. Switching to education, the state provides the city with more than $10 billion, and most of that is in unrestricted operating aid. How does the city decide what to use these funds for, and which schools are they directed to? And when are we, I know that we passed some legislation this past year, but you're concerned about mayoral control, and we really need this information. So could you tell us where the funding is going?
Let me defer in terms of the mechanics of how we take in state funding and distribute it to my colleagues, starting with Mr. Foulahan, but just say at the outset, I think if I had to summarize what I believe you would want us to do with the funding, is to continually produce better results. It's a fact, and it's all based on the analysis of the State Department of Education. It's a fact that our graduation rates are the highest they've ever been in the history of New York City, over 70%. It's a fact that our test scores have continued to improve. In fact, our English test scores improved in all 32 of our school districts in New York City. It's a fact we provided things that are foundational to the future, like pre-K for all. So in terms of return on investment, I believe we're doing the things you would want us to do and doing them efficiently. But I'd like Mr. Foulahan to talk to you about specifically how we take in the funding and determine its use.
So the mayor actually, am I on? Yes. Yes. The mayor outlined actually in the opening comments.
Dean, could you pull that a little bit closer?
I apologize. Better? The mayor outlined in his testimony one of the major uses that we're doing. And when the mayor called for meeting the CFE obligation, he pointed out that we've really no improvement in the fair student funding, how we distribute aid among our schools, and that we are allocating and we are allocating our dollars, the dollars you provide us, to reach 100% of fair student funding. So as you give us an increase, we are committed, and the mayor made that commitment, to get to 100%. We're already at 100% on our renewal and community schools, and we're willing to do it for every single school. And those dollars are teachers, directly teachers in those schools that were neglected in years past. We also do other mandates, and we're happy to give you book and verse on this, but English language learners, for other poverty-related programs. And we're happy to go through and delineate every single one of those dollars, including the mandates that are imposed on us by the state that we're happy to comply with.
Thank you very much. I think that the law says that you should be giving that information to us. It's been very difficult to get the specifics and the breakdown as to where the money is actually going, especially with particular schools. The governor's budget provides...
We will be happy to provide whatever information you need on specific information, and I'm quite sure we do that.
Great. When could we expect that?
Senator, just wanted, if I may add that in addition to, we'll answer any and all of your questions, but as Mr. Solomon just reminded me, in May, we're going to be providing a comprehensive report based on last year's discussions here in the legislature. That's going to be coming to you on time.
Okay, that's great. So we should expect that information by May.
Well,
That's
in addition to any other specifics you're asking our team to put together, we'll happily do for you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I was wondering, too, if you could include in that, and maybe it's included in your preliminary budget, but how much of the foundation aid increase that goes to high-needs districts, how much is that your Department of Education funding and your budget going to the individual high-needs districts? Could you give us some accounting of that?
I will get back to you on specifically how much the total dollar value. What we did say, and the challenge that we made to you, was with any increase you give, we would take those funds and put them towards reaching our goal. I will say the mayor also pointed out that of the executive budget that provides us $240 million in additional formula-driven school aid, it then effectively takes away $200 million by redirecting it to the charters.
How much funding per pupil does the city provide to its high-needs districts? Could you include that in any kind of information that you get to us?
No, I understood the question.
And how does that compare to the city's funding of its other schools? If that could be an element of that. And the other question I had was maintenance of effort. So state funding to education in New York City has increased at a rate of more than 1/3 faster than the city's funding increases, even though the city's reserves are at historically high levels, and the city isn't subject to either the 2% spending cap or the 2% property cap, as I pointed out previously. So I'm wondering why, Mr. Mayor, the city hasn't provided additional funding for education.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think it's very important that we compare specific facts, and we want to do that with you. I would say, as I noted in my testimony, we believe that the city's investment in education has continued to grow constantly. It was true in the Bloomberg administration, but true in my administration with our own city dollars. We appreciate state support. I think I would argue that our facts would show you that additional city investment has grown more rapidly than additional state investment. So I'd like us to compare statistics and see if we're saying the same thing.
I would just add that during the tenure of this administration, we have done, I believe, over double what the state has committed in actual direct support to our schools. And the mayor cited the share difference. While the state's share of total support for New York City has actually declined, the city share has increased. So we're now 57%, where the state is now 37%, and the state used to be in the 40s.
Thank you. And any more information you can get us on that would be helpful. Just wanted to touch briefly on failing schools. The State Education Department has determined that JHS 162 failed to show it was making demonstrable improvement since it was identified as a persistently struggling school, which means that it was performing in the lowest 5% of schools for student achievement for more than 10 years. The state required the placement of an independent receiver, but your administration, Mr. Mayor, determined that the school was not making improvement. However, under the New York City, your program, Renewal Schools program, the school was considered to be improving in that it was meeting 5 of its 6 benchmarks. This will be the 4th school to close under the city's Renewal Schools program. So the questions are, what accounts for the drastic differences in the determination of the state finding the school is not improving and needing an outside independent receiver to run the school, and your own Department of Education's determination that the school met 5 of its 6 benchmarks? Are the city's standards too low? Because that's quite a discrepancy.
Again, I respect the question deeply, Madam Chair, but I would argue we have a different perspective. A school can meet the benchmarks, but that doesn't mean we don't come to the conclusion that it needs to be closed. The question of Renewal School program is that a school has to constantly make progress to the day that will no longer be in the program. And there are dozens of schools in our Renewal School initiative that we believe are making that progress, and we look forward to the day when they graduate out of that status. There are others that we've already said either needed to be merged or consolidated because they had become ineffective at their small size, or that we're already moving to close. And then coming up at the end of this year, we will announce judgment on the entire remaining group of schools, which ones we believe have graduated out of Renewal Schools, which one are on the pathway to it, and which ones we believe are not going to make it and need to be closed. I think the difference here is that we felt, I saw this with my own eyes, I talked to parents all over the city, that the previous approach, which emphasized, the previous administration's strong focus on closing schools with, unfortunately, a lot of negative impact on kids who were left behind as the school phased out. That problem needed to be addressed. Schools that could be turned around were not being given sufficient opportunity. We had to go at those problems, and what we found with Renewal Schools is we have seen a real increase in graduation rates. We've seen a real increase in test scores, better attendance, a lot of promising signs. But we're going to look at each one with, as I said, final judgment happening by the end of this year. And I said from the moment I announced the Renewal School program, I have no problem closing a school if we've made every effort over these last few years to address its needs and turn it around and provide better leadership, more master teachers, et cetera. If that's not enough, move to closure. If it is enough, that's a huge thing for the parents and kids of that community, that a school that was struggling got back on track rather than disruption and many unintended consequences that happened with the closure. So in this one case, we were very comfortable working with the state on PS 162 to say, you know what, we understand where the state's coming from. We're happy to work with that. We're happy to do a closure and come up with a new plan.
But it just seems like instead of trying to fix the schools, that you're opting to close them rather than go to a state receivership. And you were very critical of your predecessor for closing schools. And you're talking about how your stance has changed. And this is a direct quote from November 19, 2015. Quote, Bloomberg opted to condemn schools rather than fix them, treating closure as a panacea. And so it just seems that you have changed your tune quite a bit. And why not fix these schools?
Again, Madam Chair, with real respect, I just disagree that there's a change in my beliefs. There is not. I believe the previous administration moved to close too frequently without accounting for the unintended consequences caused by the closure and without an honest effort to turn around a lot of schools that could be turned around. The proof will be in the pudding. We started with 94 schools. We're going to show you, by the time we get to the end of this calendar year, we'll have an assessment of which ones have made enough progress and which ones didn't, and we'll act accordingly. But for every school that we turn around and get on track without dislocating all the families and all the students, I think that's a victory. And I think parents would agree with me. We ultimately work for our residents and our parents. They don't want to see a school closed if it can be turned around. If it can't be turned around, parents are the first to agree with the closure. I think in the case of PS 162, we got, again, to the point where we agreed with the state's assessment that we could do something better. We've come up with a new approach, and we think it'll succeed. But I don't think there's anything about the statement you read that I disagree with at this point.
Thank you. And switching gears, I want to talk about ACS right now. And there have been a lot of press questions and stories about the ACS and mismanagement, negligence. And the budget for ACS in 2016 was nearly $3 billion, and the total state funding of this was about $680 million, which is 23% of the budget. We've had several high-profile cases of children dying, people not following up when they are supposed to follow up, and you know, there's really a deep cause for concern, because what's happening is that people are not only getting hurt, but they're actually dying because of this. And there are several things that I would like to point out. 73%, or 2,360 cases
of the closed ACS investigations lacked the required minimum number of managers' reviews. In 68%, or 2,516 cases, of both open and closed high-priority ACS investigations, a risk assessment profile was not completed within the required 40 days. 32% lacked the required number of supervisors' reviews. 53 investigations were closed without ACS investigators ever meeting with a child who was allegedly abused. In 22% of the investigations, ACS investigators did not meet the child within 24 hours of the abuse allegation. In 26% of the investigations, ACS investigators did not meet with the child the required number of times. So obviously, there's something wrong with the system, and the question is, why shouldn't the state withhold the funding for the Administration for Children's Services until you address the situation?
Madam Chair, I want to once again respectfully disagree with some of that assessment, and also even the facts you cite were based on a look at a small amount of the work of ACS. You have a real expert sitting down the row from you, and Senator Savino, who knows this work very well. I spent 8 years when I was a legislator in our city council as the chairman of the Oversight Committee. I spent a tremendous amount of time and energy working on the issue of protecting our children. And Madam Chair, I can tell you that when I started on this work in 2002, the city of New York was nowhere near as able to protect children as it is today. And that is a factual statement. The tragic case of Nix Mary Brown in the year 2006 pointed out vast gaps in the city's approach to protecting children. I commend the Bloomberg administration for making some of the reforms that were needed. We have continued to make additional reforms. But we also know that there was a disinvestment in ACS for years that we've been working intensely to correct, hiring more caseworkers, reducing caseworker ratios, providing more training to the caseworkers that they desperately needed, providing them more support from other agencies like NYPD and Department of Education. This is very personal for me. I'm a parent, and I've worked on these issues, and I consider it a moral issue that we have to protect every single child. But I have to put in context, Madam Chair, there are between 50,000 and 60,000 complaints called in every year from New York City of potential abuse and neglect of children. The overwhelming majority of those cases, Administration for Children's Services plays a crucial role in stopping abuse against children and stopping that neglect and protecting those children. In many cases, ACS asks a court for the right to remove a child from the home, and a court disagrees and stands in the way of that action at ACS, something that I think needs to be looked at more carefully because ACS often is taking a more aggressive stance and is not allowed to follow through by a judge's decision. The vast majority of our caseworkers do their jobs well and protect our children. And if you look at the overall trend over the last few years, thank God the number of child abuse and neglect cases has gone down and the number of child abuse deaths has gone down, but one is one too many. So I just have to disagree with the premise. We have real work to do. And when someone in our employ does something wrong, we fire them. As you saw in the recent cases, Amir Perkins case, people were fired who didn't do their job, and we'll do that each and every time. There'll be new leadership soon at ACS, and we're going to continue to deepen reforms, and we'll make whatever investment we need to. But I just think a lot of the assumptions that are being made are unfair. They're not based on facts. They're not based on the overall history of what's happened here, and they're certainly not showing respect for the women and men who do this work every day of protecting our children. You know, I don't think I've seen a single article talking about the children who are saved every single day. I only see coverage when there's a tragedy. The tragedy grabs at me like every one of us, and we're not going to allow these tragedies. But Madam Chair, I have to tell you, the vast majority of the work of that agency is life-saving, and I need it to continue, and we're going to keep supporting it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I think that, you know, you're saying that you dispute the facts. The facts are the facts, and also the facts are that we have several cases and names of children, like Mickey Guzman, age 5 years old, Sherlyn Yeslin Camacho, age 3 months, Zamir Perkins, age 6 years. And we have to do better. And as I said, the state is investing a lot of money into the system, and we have to do better. And the final question is, so your Commissioner Gladys Carrion is still there, and it just came out recently that she was still there, and that I was just wondering what the status is, and why is she there? If there's so many failures under the system, why is she there?
Again, Madam Chair, I respect the question, but I've spent a lot of my life working on these issues, and I think, I'm not saying the facts aren't the facts, I agree, but unfortunately the facts are not being represented fairly by the media, even in the cases that you just delineated. And I happen to have access, of course, to a deeper understanding of some of the details than the general public does. In too many cases, the media are suggesting a fact pattern that does not exist. And of course, these cases are subject to very, very careful attention because of confidentiality issues. And a picture is painted for the public that is not fair, because the vast majority of the work at ACS is succeeding in protecting children's lives. We're going to continue that work. But in terms of the Commissioner spent 40 years of her life protecting children, including as the state commissioner. She, in the last 3 years, implemented a series of reforms and improvements at ACS. There were some cases not handled properly. I've said that publicly, and it angers me, and people have been fired, and anyone who doesn't handle a case will be fired. It's as simple as that. Commissioner Carrion announced her resignation, and it was clear there would be a transitional period. That transitional period will end at the end of this week. Her first deputy commissioner will take over for the interim. A new commissioner will be in place by the end of February or beginning of March. I further want to note we're going to deepen the close working relationship between the NYPD and ACS. Again, going back to the Nix Mary Brown case, one of the most prominent and tragic cases the city ever went through. One of the fault lines, one of the problems was there was not that relationship that was needed between NYPD and ACS. We've improved over time. There's more to do. Chief Robert Boyce, who is our chief of detectives, one of the most respected leaders of NYPD, will be working more closely with ACS. In fact, will co-chair the child stat process, which is the ACS equivalent of ComStat at the NYPD. He'll be co-chairing that with the acting commissioner going forward to intensify our efforts to look deep into each case and look for any potential danger. And I think the growing cooperation and partnership between ACS and NYPD will allow us to go much farther in protecting children.
Thank you.
Assemblyman Weprin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate your, as the new chair of the Corrections Committee, I appreciate your comments on bail reform and on voluntarily raising the age, removing 16 and 17-year-olds from Rikers Island. As you know, the Assembly has long supported raising the age, and we're hopefully, with the governor putting it in his budget, that, you know, it'll be an issue that may finally come this year. I know there is a commission taking place now, appointed, where Judge Lippman is discussing some of the issues, along with some colleagues on the commission, about Rikers Island. And I know they're due to have a report soon. One of my first meetings as chair of the Correction Committee was with Commissioner Joe Ponte, and I was very impressed with his concern about safety at Rikers. And I know I've had a discussion with you as well. And I know there have been a number of incidents, and I'm happy to see that you're working on that. But I know there have been some proposals to the commission and possibly from outside the commission, the possibility of closing Rikers. I think we're talking about close to 10,000 inmates at Rikers. What are your thoughts on what should be done at Rikers, and what is your knowledge as to what the commission is going to report, the Lippman Commission, on Rikers, and what is their timing?
Assemblyman, I'm certainly not going to steal Judge Lippman's thunder. That commission continues at work. My understanding is we'll hear a report from them in the spring. I've said when I announced the preliminary budget that we'll have a lot more to say on the future of our correction system at the time of the executive budget. I want to thank you as you assume the chairmanship. We look very much forward to working with you and appreciate the partnership we've had already. And I appreciate you meeting with our correction officials, and I think you're seeing already that Commissioner Pont has achieved some pretty extraordinary reforms. And we have some examples of both reduction of violence and improvement in the way that we treat and rehabilitate our inmates that are very, very compelling. We want to do a lot more. In terms of the future of Rikers, again, I'll reserve the broad judgment until the time of executive budget, but I will say this, you know, a very powerful report came out a few weeks ago pointing out as the mass incarceration issue is becoming even more of a debate all over this country, and a bipartisan one, I want to say, in a good and healthy way, was a recognition that mass incarceration failed and was inhumane and extraordinarily costly in human and economic terms. One of the better stories in this country is in New York City, where over the last few decades, we've reduced the population at Rikers by 55%. It's now getting closer to 9,000 than 10,000. Of course, there are variations in any given week or month, but we do see a good downward trend, and we intend to continue that and deepen that. So whatever we do in terms of the specific facilities, and there's a lot of complexities we have to address, not only at Rikers Island today, but the other correction facilities around the city, and any plan that we would have going forward, we'd have to talk about all of them. But what I can say is we are reducing the number of people who are incarcerated consistently. We're coming up with alternatives that are working. And more important than anything, we're reducing crime, which reduces the flow of people into the correction system. And I want to give credit to all the men and women of the NYPD. You know, 3 years running reduction in crime, particularly in serious crime. That's the gateway to everything else. So I can safely say to you is, for anyone who wants to see change in our correction system, support us in the changes we're making in policing that are allowing us to drive down crime and get to the root cause.
Well, I look forward to working with you and your staff over the next weeks and months for various reforms at Rikers, and hopefully we're there to be as helpful as possible working with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We've been joined by Assemblywoman Yu Ling New and Assemblyman Brian Kavanaugh. Senator.
We've been joined by Senator Terrence Murphy and Senator Gustavo Rivera. And our next speaker is Senator Kruger.
Good morning, Mayor.
Morning.
And your staff. Let's do some lightning round if you can.
Okay, I'm ready. I feel like I'm on New York 1. Okay.
So there seems to be a lot of information here, I guess, coming out of both the governor's office and in a question you got, that New York City's been decreasing its MOE to education. I just want to reiterate what I thought I heard Dean Foulihan say, that actually it's the opposite. Could you repeat that? Data?
Yeah, I'll repeat from the testimony, and then Dean will take it from there, because we think the fact is pretty good here. Hold on. Oh, Dean was way ahead of me. Okay. Since 2008, the city's share of education spending, so let me just affirm this, the Bloomberg administration and my administration, both of which increased city spending on education. Since 2008, the city's share of education spending has increased from 49% to 57%, while the state share has declined from 41% to 37%.
Thank you. Senator Young brought up the ACS issues, and she is right. It's a crisis when children die. And it's a crisis when workers don't get the support they need to do the right thing, and they should be removed when they don't. But it sounded like I was hearing that the state gives you so much more money for child welfare now than it has in the past, and I didn't think that was correct. I'm looking at, again, your budget director.
I'll let Dean speak to the history. I think the state support for our child welfare efforts is crucial. And again, what is too often lost in this discussion, between 50,000 and 60,000 cases, because you're talking about every single call to the state registry has to be investigated. By definition, and we can give you the chapter and verse on the tragedies that occurred, that we feel everyone very humanly. But thank God they are a very small number compared to the tens of thousands of cases where our ACS workers get to the bottom of the situation, stop problems before they happen, provide preventative services, which is something I've backed for many years, and we've expanded, which means literally the ability of charitable and nonprofit organizations to intervene with the family and support them and help them deal with their problems. That work has continued and has deepened, and that is why so many children have been saved. And further, I've been very blunt about this, there are a number of times, hundreds of times, when ACS has asked for the removal of children from a family, only to have a judge refuse. That's unfair to the people who do such hard work at ACS, that if they are requesting a removal and a judge will not let them do that. The judge may have a reason in their own mind, but we have to grade fairly here, just as we would our police or our firefighters or anyone else who's a first responder. Our ACS workers are another type of first responders, and they're regularly saving lives. They get precious little credit for it. But when something goes wrong, I feel it personally, and we are not afraid to take the most resolute action to deal with anyone who doesn't do their job.
And in other parts of the, I'm sorry.
State funding has not changed.
It has not changed. So in other parts of the state, as charters have expanded, the state has made a commitment to not have the local district have to absorb those costs out of its school funding. But if I believe your testimony was that New York City would actually have to kick in an additional $200 million of its school funding for
Correct.
the charter proposal this year?
Correct.
And that's a new demand on the city?
Yes.
And because there's also a proposal to not lift the charter cap statewide, but to allow whatever charters are unassigned now to all come to New York City. Do you have an estimate of additional costs to yourself if that all were to happen, particularly the building costs?
We'll get you that estimate. I don't have a quick estimate.
Because my understanding was up until now, there was this sort of interesting, the city kicks in the first $40 million,
Right. Yes.
but then after that, not. But if we suddenly see a massive increase in charters opening in New York City under the governor's language, could you potentially see a much bigger cost to yourselves, not just on operating, but on capital as well?
Yes, we would definitely see cost increases, but as the mayor pointed out, there's already room in the existing cap that applies to New York City for charters.
Correct, but there could be
Yes,
so
there would
many
be
more.
additional costs.
Thank you. Pre-K, you said there was a cut in funding for pre-K in New York City in the state budget?
Yeah, and again, it's in the context of something good, which is the consolidation of how the grant funding is used. We applaud that, but the poison pill that has to be addressed is that the per-seat rate would be cut in the bargain, and we think those things should be delinked. We think consolidation is smart government, but cutting the per-seat rate is not good for our children, obviously. It means 3,400 seats that are currently funded would not be funded.
So to be parochial, my district is one of the 2 districts in the city that still has incredible wait lists for pre-K. We don't have adequate pre-K seats. Your people know that.
Yep.
And partly it's because our schools are overcrowded and the rental costs for alternative sites have been so high. I don't want to see any cuts in pre-K money at all, but I also really want the kids in my district to have the same right to go to pre-K as the other districts.
Senator, as you know, although I'm a Brooklynite, I am living currently on the Upper East Side, and I talk to people all the time about this problem. We absolutely want to do more to solve it. We made some progress in terms of school seats in general and pre-K seats in specific for the Upper East Side. But as you indicated, it is literally the hardest territory in the city for us to address because, one, it's so thoroughly built out, and two, because of the costs involved with the very limited new development that is happening. We are still trying to find creative solutions, but I want to just a respectful minor correction. Even though it is not what we ideally would want for any district, which is the maximum seats immediately, geographically where parents want them ideally, every single student is guaranteed a pre-K seat. Now, in your district, I think, again, one of the most difficult situations in all of the city of New York, we still work very hard, parent by parent, with a facilitated enrollment system that's literally a person who is a specialist working individually with that parent to find them the closest available seat that works for them. For many parents, as you know, that might be closer to their work than it is to their home. It might be better for them. A lot of parents feel good about a seat that's very near their workplace for a variety of reasons. But we will work with any one of your constituents to find a placement. They will have a placement for free. We'll do our damnedest to make sure it's as convenient as possible while we're trying to build out the capacity.
We continue to struggle. I want to shift to housing. While some people apparently think plastic bags is the biggest crisis facing New York City, I would argue the lack of affordable housing is, and the future environmental damage that will continue until we radically change our consumer behavior and our production behavior. The 421A proposal that's been renamed, although I'm calling it the, you know how the old 421A was bad, this has a new name, but it's worse. There are some people actually proposing that co-ops get brought back into this. You in your testimony testified about the old 421A, your proposal, which I didn't love either, by the way.
Your equal opportunity, Senator.
There you go. The new one, can you project what the loss of city revenue would be if co-ops were brought back into this program the way they were in the old program?
I will give you a broad answer, and then my colleagues may give you something more specific. But here's the bottom line. We had a program, which I say is the old broken 421A, that cost taxpayers a lot and subsidized luxury housing. We can't let that happen again. It's not in the interest of our people. It's not in the interest of our taxpayers. I think at this moment it would be even more unacceptable than it was years ago. So right now, as you saw from the numbers we put forward, the current proposal is inching back towards the same cost as the previous one, which rewarded luxury housing. And we fear that the door is now open for the inclusion of luxury housing, which could make it as costly or even more costly quickly, easily could be more costly than the old 421A. So that would then be the worst of all worlds, where taxpayers are being hit worse than they were in the past. We're not getting the affordability we deserve, and we're subsidizing luxury buildings again. I think a lot of people looked, there was a particular building on 57th Street, luxury building, very tall luxury building, that when New Yorkers found out that that got a tax break for purely luxury housing, no affordable housing, there was a massive outcry in New York City. We just cannot go back to those days. So we are happy to work with all members of the legislature and the governor and all other interests on the current proposal, which in our view has merits and has issues we want to address too. But going back in the direction of the old proposal would be untenable and would make it a net loss for the people of New York City.
I agree, although again, think it's even worse because even without the condos, the new proposal would allow market rate to take advantage of 421A even if there was no affordable units in a specific building. So again, I would urge everyone listening to look carefully at that proposal and the damage it would do. Personally, if I had $2.4 billion in city taxpayer revenue, I'd actually want to buy $2.4 billion in affordable housing with it. Not maybe $150 million in affordable housing. There was a bill passed last year, which we then did a counter bill, but then the governor vetoed on the MTA sort of real estate not related to transportation being able to violate New York City zoning, actually anyone's zoning in the 12 MTA counties. Disappointingly, the governor vetoed the legislature's attempt to reverse that. Is the city of New York attempting to do anything about that at this point, and what do you see that as causing problems for you in the future?
You know, Senator, I'll start, and again, my colleagues may want to add that we worked very productively with our colleagues in suburban counties, and by the way, on a bipartisan basis. There was a lot of unity on this point, that it was not the place of the state of New York or any entity of the state of New York like the MTA to override local zoning, which is, I think, pretty sacrosanct. There's a number of things localities do. Policing, education, zoning, that all of us can say are decisions best handled locally with maximum citizen input. And the MTA should not be overriding that reality. And I think clearly there was tremendous support in both the Senate and the Assembly, having heard from local leaders of all different size jurisdictions and both parties. We felt very much appreciative for the support we received in the legislature. We disagreed with the governor's decision, obviously. We think we need to restart that process again and build up even more support from the local level, because I think it's something people feel deeply. They do not want to see their local rights trampled on. And it matters a lot in a place like New York City, but I could argue matters even more in smaller jurisdictions that could fundamentally change the trajectory of their cities and towns to have major new development that is done without their approval. So we're going to work closely with all of you and with our colleagues in local government to once again try and address this.
And then, I know I'm at 0, but I'm taking advantage of ranking status for a moment. In your testimony, you propose that a mansion tax go into effect for apartments or houses selling for over $2 million, and say that the money would be used for senior housing. Can you explain a little bit how much money you project this to be, and what kind of senior housing program would you be starting with it?
We project it would provide us with $330 million a year, would allow us to provide ongoing support for 25,000 seniors who are having trouble affording housing. It would mean that for all seniors who are part of this initiative, they would pay no more than 30% of whatever income they have. And we know so many of our seniors are on low fixed incomes. Be 25,000 apartments on top of our current 200,000 apartment plan. So everything we're doing in our housing plan, 200,000 apartments, reaches 500,000 people by 2024. This new initiative, which again I think is fair because it only reaches those who have homes of $2 million or more in value when it's sold, and people who are about to get a major tax break from the federal government, as everyone knows. This will allow us to reach 25,000 more seniors on an ongoing basis, lock in affordability for them long-term through preservation. So we would be subsidizing apartments in place for the long term.
Thank you. And thank you for your last sentence, which was reminding everyone that Washington is very likely to change our tax structure to lower taxes for the highest income Americans very, very soon, and that, in fact, will translate into less money available from the federal government for the programs we depend on, and actually is a reason to support the Assembly's proposal to increase the millionaire tax, as they put it, and also to recognize that proposing a tax on high-cost house sales, or apartment sales, still will translate, when we do the math, I assume, to be a significant reduction in people's federal taxes, even if they see some increase upon the sale of a home, or some increase because they're in the highest income brackets as a state resident.
I would argue, Senator, even if nothing changed on taxation, this would be fair to ask those who own homes of $2 million or more to do a little more to help seniors who built our city, built our state, and now are struggling to have housing. I think it would be fair under any circumstance. But given that, I agree with you. This will, unfortunately, from my point of view, when the federal government gets done, when the Congress gets done with its tax plan, unquestionably the tax breaks for wealthy individuals will far outstrip anything we're talking about here, and the wealthy will be paying less in taxes overall than they're paying now, even with the continuation of the millionaire's tax or extension of it or improvement of it, and with a mansion tax. Still, wealthy people are going to end up with more money in their pocket under any scenario based on what we're hearing from Washington.
Do you happen to know where a lot of those wealthy people live?
Again, please.
Do you happen to know where a lot of those wealthiest people live?
There's a number of districts I could name. One of them might be yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We've been joined by Assemblyman Dillon and Assemblyman Otis. Next question, Assemblywoman Nolan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mayor, welcome to Albany.
Thank you.
I just want to, I do have a question, but I want to point out something that was said earlier. It referenced it as someone who's a parent of a child in a city public school. It's actually quite easy to find the budget for each individual school, each of the 1,600 schools that the city administers. You just go to the website and you type in budget, school budgets, and you can get the budget for every single individual school. and as someone who's complained at times about those budgets, I would point out that it's something that is relatively recent, and I congratulate you and Chancellor Farina for providing that information, which in prior administrations was not available by individual school. And it is very helpful for parents advocating for their children, and it is available on a school-by-school basis. I do have a question on trailers. I've asked both you and Mayor Bloomberg about it, and you know that it's a continuing sore spot for many of us, and particularly in Bronx, Brooklyn, and Queens, where I represent. And I know there is a report that we've required to be filed, but I would like to hear from you what the progress is on eliminating trailers.
I'm going to start, and I think Sharif will add. But look, the bottom line has been we are committed to a phase out of all trailers. As we've been honest with you, it takes time and is complicated in some specific locations. But in fiscal 13, we had 352 trailers in use. We are continuing decline now. In fiscal 17, we're down to 245. We are projecting the next jump for next year to go down to 176. We're just going to continue consistently to move, and we obviously have put substantial resources in the budget to do so.
Thank you very much. I want colleagues to understand that even, and this is really great progress, and you deserve credit for it, but even with this progress, there are still more children attending school in a trailer in the city of New York than in some of the largest districts in our state, and that has been the case for over 30 years. So again, the contrast, colleagues, that there are more children attending schools in a trailer in the city of New York for the last 30 years than the size of most of the districts of the 700 school districts of our state. One of the reasons I bring this up is that we tried very hard to give you some additional revenue to get rid of these abominations, and the city is due, I believe, $700 million from the Smart Schools Bond Act. You didn't mention the Bond Act in your testimony, but I wondered if you would care to comment. My understanding is the city's application is there. Do we know why the executive has not acted on it?
In terms of the Bond Act, I'm going to defer to Dean.
So, thank you. We have, as you know, completely allocated funding for the removal of the trailers. So that is completely in the city budget. It is now going through the process that the mayor outlined. And no, we have had our application before the state, and we're waiting for approval.
Do we have any idea whether the Bond Act, have they reached out to you, the people on the board of the state Bond Act?
I believe we submitted in November. I'm going to ask if last May. And last May, and
the Education Committee intends to keep some focus on what's happening with the Smart Schools Bond Act. So we will follow up with Chancellor Farina.
We would appreciate that.
And we will certainly be following up with the executive. I would like the mayor just to comment, if you would, in your testimony. You talked a little bit about the importance of the CFE settlement. Some suggest that public school parents like you and I have been duped into thinking that this is, it's been settled or resolved. I find that statement shocking. I don't want to get into who said it, but I thought it was very ill-advised. As someone whose son never really, my son's graduating, your son has already graduated, and your daughter, we were part of this so long ago, we never really saw the true fulfillment of CFE. Do you believe that CFE has been finished or fulfilled, and that you and I were duped into thinking that there was enough money for the city schools and all the schools in our state, many of whom, rural, poor areas as well, would benefit by a full CFE?
Assembly member, first of all, this is an occasion for me to thank you for what you do as chair of the Education Committee, which is so important, so crucial and important for the children in New York City. It really is, because you're asking a question that needs to be answered and hasn't been in our public discourse, and it amazes me it has not been. No, there has not been a resolution on CFE. Yes, there has been a consistent effort to dupe people into thinking the issue is resolved, and in the past, it's not in the past. It's perfectly alive today to the tune of $1.6 billion. Every single person here and every parent in New York City who says, why is my school not getting 100% of fair student funding formula? It's because we should be getting $1.6 billion more in our budget, according to a decision of the Court of Appeals, the highest court in the state, a decade ago. And there are some who allege that that decision was not binding. It was absolutely binding. And further proof is that in the Elliott Spitzer administration, CFE was implemented. And funding was changed, not just for New York City, but other high-needs districts in upstate cities and rural areas as well. So the state of New York not only recognized a decision by our highest state court, but then proceeded to implement it. But for a change of administration and one of the greatest economic crises in the history of this country, I suspect we would have seen steady progress and we'd be having a very different discussion today. But no, it cannot be airbrushed out of history. Our children have suffered for the lack of that funding, and you've seen it, and I've seen it as public school parents. We're not going to let it go, and what we are concerned about is we see a change in the state budget terminology that suggests an attempt to remove the notion of CFE once and for all from the discussion. That's not particularly legal in our view.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Senator Marty Golden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for being here. I'm sure it's been a long morning, and it's going to be a little longer, I presume. But on some of the questions, I had to leave for some press conferences, so my questions may have been asked and answered. And one of them I heard when I came in, Senator Kruger was talking about, and I know Kathy had spoken about the ACS. I don't think anybody in this room doesn't believe ACS has to be revamped, that they need help, and something has to be done, and funding has to be put into them. We passed the bill out last week. We passed it last year, and the governor vetoed it, and that's limiting the number of cases to the ACS workers to 15. You may even be under that number, but there are other counties across the state that are not. So we want to limit the number of caseload to each case worker. Would you be supportive of that bill?
Having not seen the language of the bill, I just want to reserve judgment, but let me agree with the concept. We have been trying to drive down caseloads, and we succeeded at that by additional city funding. So our goal, which we've acted on, is reduce caseloads and more training for the caseworkers who have very, very difficult, complex jobs. Also, what you didn't hear, and I want to reiterate, is we announced that the first deputy commissioner will be taking over the agency as of next Monday, that a permanent new commissioner will be in place end of February, beginning March. But additional important point, someone you probably know well, Chief Bob Boyce of the NYPD.
Excellent.
Will be coming over, he's going to be doing all his regular job too, but in addition, he's going to come over to ACS and co-chair the Child Stat program, which is based on ComStat, which has had so much success in driving down crime. Child Stat was initiated in the Bloomberg administration, to their credit. We're going to enhance that approach and make it even closer in its mindset to ComStat, and bring over the Chief of Detectives NYPD to co-chair those meetings and even get deeper into the cases to determine how we can do better.
Mr. Mayor, if the question's already been asked and answered, just tell me it's been, so, because my members, I'm sure more members want to speak, and I'm sure that we can look it up later and find out what the testimony was. There's another bill that we had 2 years ago and a year ago, and it's about giving our ACS workers, the protective workers, into the home iPads and let them do their actual work within the home so that the cross grids can show that the individual is there, taking a picture of the inside of the home and taking a picture of the child and a picture of the house itself. Hopefully you can be supportive of that bill. And there's a backup piece to this that has not yet been put forward, but there is technology out there that today gives you in-time technology of how many times that child's been in and out of foster care, what the frailties of the child are, the abuse of the child, the parents' background, the foster parents' background, and domestic violence. All of those things are there in this technology. It's working in Chemung County, and it's working, Suffolk County is looking to do a pilot program. I don't think it should be a pilot program. I think it should be a statewide program. But if not, at least hopefully the city will take the initiative to try and have these interviews with these individuals that have this technology and try to get that into your iPads and get the workers in the homes with these iPads so that we can get a true picture of what's going on in the true time. I think that's important.
Senator, a couple of points. One, I now have clarification on your proposed legislation on the caseload cap at 15 cases. I want to just formally say we endorse and support your legislation. Second, I think one of the things we want to do, the NYPD has had such success with the use of new technology, and the work of ACS and NYPD parallel in crucial areas. But as you know, and this was the tragic truth in the Nix Murray Brown case in 2006, the two agencies didn't have a culture of connection the way we needed them to. There's been real progress. Under Commissioner O'Neill and Chief Boyce, there is a intensified idea of deepening the interconnection between ACS and NYPD, which will be exemplified by the co-chairing of the child staff process. Your point is well taken, that we should also learn from the positive example of NYPD, which is the smartphones. Bill Bratton's great focus on bringing that handheld technology to our officers, which has had tremendously positive effect. Any number of crimes have been stopped with those smartphones that would not have been in the past. I agree with that concept in terms of ACS workers. We have to figure out details in terms of cost, training, et cetera. But in principle, I think that's a very productive idea.
Another issue, the Veterans Program. You introduced the beautiful Veterans Program a year ago, 2 years ago. Tremendously successful. We have a tremendous number of homeless in our city. I'm sure it's been addressed. But where I live in Bay Ridge and Fort Hamilton Army Base, I have homeless. Probably about 40% of it is military. And one of the reasons is because the VA hospital is there. The other reason is because Fort Hamilton is there. I was a little distressed to see that you cut an employee from that and that you've taken some funding from there. I do believe, I hope that you look at that and redo, it's in the budget, cutting one employee and one, what was the name of the program? Go ahead.
Dean and I are not aware of any cut to that program, so we will follow up with you.
Do me a favor, I read it, so it's out there, so if it is, please
we want to correct it if it's wrong, for sure.
Okay. The other thing is the 421A. I know that everybody's talking about these luxury condos. We're not talking about luxury condos. We're talking about condos in the outer boroughs so people can have affordable living. We want people to be able to move. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I want to differentiate because you're making a fair point. But on the previous, thank you for the acknowledgement. New York City has ended chronic veteran homelessness. And the federal government recognized this fact, and it was, as you know, a big job. We had thousands of veterans that we had to address, and we were able to. There still are veterans who are not chronically homeless, but still at times are homeless. That's still not good enough from my point of view. I want to reach every single one of them, and the mandate is to find housing for each and every one. So we've made real progress in that area. We've been adding positions to address veteran housing needs. So we'll check on that.
Keep it up.
But I can just jump ahead on the condo issue. What I've tried to say in the testimony is, right now, the proposal the state has made, after all the negotiation with the different players, there are some very good elements to that proposal. There are some areas of concern we still want to talk through. It is more expensive to the taxpayer than what we originally proposed, and it doesn't achieve as much affordability. But it still has merits. It's still much better. Hold on one second, if I may. Just much better than what was originally going on a few years ago with 421A. Our concern is not what you have proposed, which you're right is outer borough and for folks of, I wouldn't say limited means, but certainly not luxury apartments. Our concern centrally is anything that would take us another step back toward the old broken 420A, which literally subsidized pure luxury apartments.
I agree with you. There is a problem, obviously. There's $1 billion off the street right now. That money is someplace else. It's not being invested in housing. It's not being invested in low-income housing. It's not giving the city its fair shot. That money is somewhere else. It could be in Philadelphia. It could be offshore. It's anywhere. And the longer it takes us to get that bill done, the longer that money is off the street. We need the people building those units. We need all of the players at the table, and we need to close down on this bill ASAP so we can get that money distributed to the city for affordable housing. We cannot afford to leave this out any longer, sir. Okay? I know my time is limited, so that's why I'm running through this. Three-quarter disability and New York City Police Department. The police department, obviously, and it's a negotiation, and the last thing you want to do is get in the middle of a negotiation here. But you got 13,000 or 14,000 police officers out there without three-quarter disability. It doesn't make much sense to keep that many officers out there without disability. We're keeping them on the job anyway, so it's costing us more money to getting them off on disability. So I would suggest that we try to come to a close on that if we can. I know that the NYPD was at 4%, you were at 2%. I'm sure somewhere in the middle we can come to some ground. I'm sure that dealing with the, and I'm not going to ask you to get involved, I'm just asking you as a senator and as a representative from the city of New York that you'd come to some resolution on that as soon as possible.
Let me just very brief response. First of all, Senator, in addition to your current public service, I thank you for the time you spent as a member of the NYPD.
Thank you.
And I will just state the facts so everyone's clear on it. We have almost every municipal union, and this is a striking reality, almost every municipal union under contract in New York City, including every uniformed service union except the PBA, every other police union, which you know there are 4 others except the PBA. That's the contract side. On the disability side, as you know, we've come to an agreement with our firefighters, our sanitation workers, and our correction officers on a disability plan, each one tailored to the specific reality of their department, all agreed to, all implemented. Again, the only place we have not been able to find an agreement is with the PBA, and we have sought that agreement, and we will continue to. There's a mediation process going on right now, and I have said very clearly that I will do anything and everything to work together to see if we can come to a positive result. But, Senator, I just emphasize, we're very proud that we have all of our other uniformed service workers under contract and with the kind of disability plans that are fair to them. We want to continue that progress.
Last question, and before my co-chairs here kill me. The Brooklyn hospitals, the hospital Brooklyn 1, have you been briefed? Do you understand what's going on at the state level?
The part you said a moment, the hospital?
In Brooklyn North, they're going to have condensing 4 hospitals into a, similar to what you have, Haitian hospitals. I'm not sure. I think there's a deficit there of $1 billion plus. I'm not sure we're not moving into the same here with the state program. But are you briefed on that and with the state fully from the governor's office?
Not fully. I think from what I know so far, it's an honest effort to try and deal with the ever-changing realities of healthcare costs, which are really already a very difficult place in terms of handling it, and only going to get worse if the ACA is repealed. So I think from what I've seen, it's a productive proposal, but I cannot say I've seen all the details of it.
I would ask you to delve into that, because it does, Kings County is ground zero when it comes to health care, not just for the city, but for the state and for the nation. As Brooklyn goes, so shall this state, so shall this nation. I don't want them closing University Hospital. I don't want them closing any hospitals, because we need those hospitals open and available to the people of our communities. I'm from Brooklyn South, but if you close a hospital in Brooklyn North, it affects Brooklyn South. It affects
concern about the senior centers and potential loss of funding with the shifting that the governor's looking to do with the Title 20 funding, that perhaps would take what's discretionary right now to the city and move it to a mandate for something else, which would be, in this case, child care, which could also be a worthy cause. But again, we don't want to be taking money away from our senior citizens. So I want to say that I agree with you on that, and I share your voice in saying to the governor to please leave the Title 20 funding alone. However, there's one area where you and I seem to have a disagreement on, and that is with what has been transpiring over the last week, the potential for New York City to be losing billions of dollars in federal funding if they do not comply with federal law. And for the city, this could potentially mean $7 billion. Now, as you're aware, the federal government only issues detainer requests for individuals who are here illegally under certain circumstances. It is limited. It's not just a blanket if someone is here illegally or if they merely commit a traffic violation, as you have said in some news shows over the weekend. It's strictly for individuals who pose a threat to public safety or have previously been convicted. Under Local Law 58 and 59, which you signed into law in 2014, the city no longer complies necessarily with detainer requests in certain circumstances. In fact, over a 2-year period from October 1st, 2014 to September 30th, 2016, the city only complied with 32 out of 584. And as I mentioned, the federal government only issues those requests in certain circumstances. Someone poses a threat to the public or has previously had a conviction. My issue is, why would the mayor of the city of New York, who is entrusted to protect the safety of our citizenry, say that they're not going to comply with these detainer requests when they're only in certain circumstances? So for instance, if an individual is here, conducts sexual misconduct, forcible touching, sexual abuse in the 2nd or 3rd degree, grand larceny, welfare fraud, identity theft, and this is just a small list of a much larger list in which the city refuses to comply with detainer requests from the federal government. Why would you protect individuals who are here legally committing these crimes instead of putting your citizenry first and foremost and ensuring that we receive the federal funding we need for our law enforcement to do their job?
Assembly member, I know you are a true believer in your ideology, and I am in mine, and we have very different facts we're working from, so we're just going to have to disagree, I think, on even the premise of the question, in my opinion, but let me go piece by piece real quick. There are 170 offenses that are, as a matter of New York City law, when any of those offenses is committed, we cooperate with ICE.
I agree with you on that. There are 170, but there's many more that are not included.
Well, but again, I respectfully think that I've seen this attempt to confuse the meaning of what we're doing. If there are some offenses that we should add, we are willing to do that always. But I would say anyone in good conscience who reads that list of 170 offenses, which is essentially any act of violence, anything involving a weapon, anything involving terror, any major drug offenses, it's quite comprehensive, understands the intent is to protect the safety of all New Yorkers. And we will cooperate fully with ICE, and we have cooperated fully with ICE. I would disagree with you, and again, and I'm willing to add offenses if there, when you come up with a list of 170 offenses, if there were several more that should be included, I'm perfectly happy to include them. But on the point about how ICE makes its requests, I think it is unfair to say that every one of their requests, even previously, let alone under a new administration, would track that same notion of serious and violent crime. We have no such guarantee. So we are concerned that any offense, and the examples I've given, low-level marijuana possession, for example, could, in the eyes of ICE, be considered for deportation. The problem is we have 500,000 people in our city, a number of whom are parents of children or breadwinners for their families. Now, I would argue on a humane and moral level, and I can certainly say that Cardinal Dolan has spoken out in the same vein, and many other faith leaders, but I also will tell you on a practical level, from the point of view of taxpayers, is it right to deport someone who did a very minor offense, leave a family without a breadwinner, leave children without their parents? Is that good public policy? No. So, final point, on the $7 billion, respectfully, by the decision of or the evaluation of our corporation counsel, Zach Carter, former U.S. attorney, that is not a figure that we see any scenario for dealing with. The only, according to the Supreme Court decision in 2012 written by Justice Roberts, the current Chief Justice, any attempt to cut funding must conform to a specific funding stream. In the executive order, it mentions only 2 agencies, Justice and Homeland Security. The grand total of their funding to New York City is between $150 and $200 million. And that means if they went ahead with that, we believe we can defeat it in court on many levels. But let's say it were to happen, then the federal government make a decision to take away anti-terror funding from New York City. I believe they're going to think twice before doing that beyond all the questions of legality. So talk to Commissioner O'Neill, talk to police chiefs all around the country. They will tell you that maintaining the working relationship between immigrant communities and police is foundational to public safety, that the minute this type of detainer situation gets to be much more extensive and based on much more minor offenses, it will shut down the willingness of undocumented folks to speak to police officers for fear of deportation. It will make us all less safe. That's the belief structure we're working from.
Well, I think that we can be compassionate at the same time look at protecting our citizens, and I think there is an issue here because when violent and serious crimes that's the only case in which what the city defines violent and serious crime. That's the only case in which the city will comply. But there's a whole slew of other crimes, and you asked for suggestions. So sexual misconduct, forcible touching, sex abuse, the second and
Your
third degree,
microphone's off.
grand larceny, welfare fraud, and identity theft, all crimes that currently an individual can commit, and the city will refuse to comply with a detainer request. I think that's something we need to look at and make sure our priorities are focused on ensuring that in public safety and making sure that we're complying with the federal law so we get the $7 billion, because we can't afford to lose that.
Again, just really quickly, as somebody member, I think those are two separate concepts. I think we believe that the executive order on its face is contradictory and attempts to do things beyond that which the Supreme Court has allowed. And we're going to challenge it if there's an effort to even take away funding. Until that time, it's abstract, but we will challenge it in court, and I know a number of other cities and states will as well. The last time we had a scenario like that, it was President Obama's executive action on immigration, which you remember was challenged in court by states and ultimately defeated. So we remind people of that history. But I would caution, you list in good faith a number of offenses you believe are not included. I would like our lawyers to talk to you to show you how we constructed the 170 offenses, because I think they do overlap with some of the categories you've talked about. I think there are some, and you mentioned, that I believe are not on our list and deserve full consideration, and we'll work quickly on that. I think there are others, because if you look on all sorts of areas of sexual abuse, for example, they're clearly delineated a number of offenses. I believe we are addressing those issues, but I will certainly want a dialogue to see if there's areas we should add.
I appreciate that. First, sexual abuse in the first degree is included on your list, but second and third degree are not. So I appreciate you, and I will continue the dialogue.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Our next speaker is Senator Squadron.
Thank you very much, chairs. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and actually I extend that with some specific ones. In the last year, the city has expended significant funds to make good on the prior administration's promise to make Bushwick Inlet Park a reality, $160 million. Greenpoint and all of the city really appreciate that. It shows that a promise can be kept. Sometimes it takes the next administration, but it can. You referenced design build earlier, which for the BQE process, which is going to cut like a scar through my district for a number of years. The city, I want to point out, is funding $1.7 billion of that rehab, which is 100% of the funding. We appreciate that quite a bit. And on resiliency in Lower Manhattan, Assemblymember New is also here and has already started that fight. The city has put in significant funding, well over $100 million, towards a continuous storm barrier from 23rd Street around the tip of Lower Manhattan and back around. We still have a gap and we want to continue working, but your resiliency folks have been strong on that. Last year's budget was an investment. We appreciate all of those things. There's no question in that, just a number of thank yous. I do, though, want to talk about Rivington House briefly, which is also in my district. I think many here have heard of it. In December, I sent a letter to the Corporation Council suggesting that based on the administration's comments on Rivington House, it appeared from the public record that there could potentially be a False Claims Act case to pursue here. And just to take you through it, in September, Deputy Mayor Shorris used the term deceptive practices. In last March, former Press Secretary Hinton said Allure misled the city. In July of 2016, Deputy Mayor Shorris said that he believed the sellers intended to keep it as a nursing home. I'll continue. Mr. Mayor, you in August said that they misled us, quote. In September, you called them unscrupulous developers looking to make a buck. I know we've already spoken about housing here. In April, you said we are looking at all legal options because there's a lot of evidence they misled us. In April, again, you reiterated that. Unfortunately, since I've sent the letter on the False Claims Act, the only comment and response from the administration, and this is unfortunately sometimes a pattern, was at a press conference where you dismissed the entire thing out of hand as a simple press release. Well, the letter is here. It's quite substantive. We have no idea what hasn't been shared with the public, because it hasn't been shared with the public. Based on what has, the Lower East Side community has good reason to believe a False Claims Act case with treble damages could move forward. We appreciate the moderate investment to replace what happened at Rivington House from the city, but it's moderate. It does not replace Rivington House. treble damages on a False Claims Act could have a significant impact. Why do you dismiss that out of hand? And why isn't the city pursuing a False Claims Act case on the Rivington House shot?
Senator, look, you and I have worked together for a long time, and I know you put forward the suggestion in good faith. I may have been speaking out of frustration. I didn't mean to make that too personal. I apologize for that. But clearly, all the quotes you read were based on a very heartfelt anger at what the developer did and a sense that the people were cheated. You know me, I have a lot of concerns about some of the ground rules in our laws related to the free enterprise system that I think are overly generous. I would love nothing more than to find a way to recoup what has been done to the community. But respectfully, long before your letter, I have asked this question probably 24 times of my corporation counsel, who goes back and looks constantly for a pathway and cannot find it, one that he believes will legally be effective. We're not going to bring an action if we believe it's susceptible to immediate defeat. So if you know something we don't know, and I will directly arrange for a conversation between you and Zach Carter. If you found a path we haven't, I will thank you publicly, and we will implement it. But to date, we have not found a way to recoup that, and it angers me deeply. What I can say is because we have changed our administrative approach, you know now that no such action can be taken without my personal signature, and if this had been presented to me, I would have turned it down faster than I can finish this sentence. City Council has passed laws to regulate the process going forward. There's not going to be another situation like this. But I would love to get the resources back. I just don't know how.
Right. Mr. Mayor, to be clear, I don't have any information the city doesn't have. That's the problem. All I have is the extensive public record that I read, plus the report of the Attorney General and extensive news reports about multiple ongoing investigations at lots of levels and the report of the city comptroller on it. The False Claims Act is pretty clear, uses very similar language to the language we've seen out of the administration. And what I would urge and request, respectfully, is that if there's something you know that we don't, you share it with us. Because it frankly leads to questions when there's this very strong public record at the highest levels of the administration accusing them of misleading around the amount they were paying for a deed restriction that, in everyone's intent would have required a healthcare facility, though a for-profit one. And, to just be told, we agree, but we can't, is not sufficient for a community that's still smarting from the loss of that healthcare facility.
Well, Senator, look, I think it's absolutely fair to say it would be helpful to your community to delineate our legal understanding, and we can certainly do that. In addition to the reforms to make sure that no such incident happens again, that we have made major commitments to the community to try to, in some way, make up for what was lost. That the Rivington facility had gone through changes and was being used less than it had in the past, but we have committed to a nursing facility as part of our health and hospitals system that will help low-income seniors in your community as one way to try and give back some of what was lost. And that is a good faith effort. But the whole episode, I've been so angry since it's happened, angry for all of us. And as Attorney General Schneiderman pointed out in his report, it's quite clear these developers attempted to game the system. And I wish they would pay for that. And you've noted in other situations we have not done business with them. But right now we will look under every stone. And if you can help us find a better approach, if we have a legal leg to stand on, we will go for it.
Right, and I do hope that the Corporation Counsel or the Mayor's Office does respond with exactly that legal delineation of why a False Claims Act is not appropriate here sooner rather than later. I think we would really appreciate it. And thank you for the time and for those other items.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Squadron.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Hooper.
That'd be great.
Hooper. Assemblywoman Hooper. Hooper, I'm sorry, I said it right. Okay. Those are loud. Move over. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I didn't recognize the name when you said Hopper. I thought we had a new member.
If I kept going, I'd get the right one.
All right, thank you. Before I ask the esteemed mayor maybe just one question, really. I would like to acknowledge Dean Fullahan, whom you had the wisdom to take into your administration. And Dean, remember I always told you, it doesn't matter where you go, I shall always find you. Welcome to Albany.
I think that was heartfelt.
It was heartfelt, yes. Dean and I had a strong, wonderful working relationship, and one of the brightest men and one of the brightest persons I've had the privilege to work with. And you're really blessed to have him aboard. My question to Mayor de Blasio relates to something that definitely has an impact on Nassau County, from where I hail. Anything that happens in New York City definitely has an impact throughout the state. And as we have witnessed over the past few hours, the president has taken positions that are quite unusual as it relates to what we do in the United States, generally speaking. I'm waiting for the other shoe to fall. And this question is seeking from you an opinion as it relates to the unaccompanied, undocumented, illegal youth who arrived in this nation, and specifically New York State, in the school year 2015-2016. In the school district in Hempstead, Nassau County, we have probably the highest number of undocumented, unaccompanied youth outside of New York City. And I would like to know if you would share with me what type of plans would you have when the president, from what I understand, will be initiating the removal of these youth from the United States. How would you respond to that so that we might have some idea of how we should respond when this, I anticipate very shortly, that the president will present an executive order to remove these young people? Could you share that with me, please?
Yes, absolutely, Assemblymember. I thank you for the question. It's one of the most powerful questions before us as a nation right now. Look, I raised this concern to the president when I met with him. And
excuse me, you said you raised that specific
the concern
issue?
about you can call them dreamers, you can call them DACA children, whatever way you want to call
yes,
it. The way we talked about it was specifically about children who came here not of their own choice, grew up here, essentially have only known America, and in many instances would have no connection to the country they came from. And at that moment in the discussion with the president, then President-elect, the then Senator, now Attorney General, Mr. Sessions, participated in the conversation. And I spoke very explicitly about the impact that it would make on children and families to have these children deported, what it would mean morally, what it would mean humanly, what it would mean for the families left behind, what it would mean, again, for the relationship with our police and communities. We went into great detail. I will not typify the president, then President-elect, now President Trump's response, but I will say that I think he recognized that this was a different part of the reality than the larger immigration debate. And he has made several statements since becoming president that suggest he may treat those eligible for DACA differently. Now, I do not want to assume anything, especially given what I see as the extremism of the recent executive orders. But I'm going to hold out hope that there will be some understanding in the new administration that those children should be treated unquestionably as you would any other American, because that's the only thing they've known for the vast majority of them. And that a lot of them are contributing greatly to our nation right now and have great promise and should be treated as children of promise and who love this country. So I'm going to offer that as, I hope, an indicator of something that may turn out better than we fear. In the event it does not, we will actively engage in any legal action we can, working with other cities and states, and I know many will join, to stop any effort to deport our dreamers. And we will also, as we've started to do in New York City, provide legal assistance to help families not be torn apart. Again, this is moral, and some of our faith leaders are speaking out deeply on this. In fact, the U.S. Conference of Bishops is meeting here on an emergency basis to address this crisis, because they believe, as Pope Francis believes, that all immigrants should be respected wherever they are in the world. But it's also a very practical challenge, because the minute dreamers are deported in any appreciable numbers, that will be the final straw. Again, the relationship between police and community. It will also leave many families without a breadwinner and start to force more and more responsibility for those families onto taxpayers. It's a very slippery slope. So our best option, if we do get to that moment, is to, one, fight legally with all the tools we have, and two, provide individual support for those families to try and stop those individual deportations.
I really appreciate the position that New York City has taken. As you are aware, we in the Assembly have been working diligently to address the issues of the dreamers. But specifically, I'm speaking about what I believe I heard, or maybe read, that the President has indicated that anyone who has come here and has used his or her information fraudulently, in other words, wrong address or illegal information. I'm thinking now about the youth who came here who were unaccompanied, without adults, who've been here less than 2 years and are in elementary school. In the village of Hempstead, we have a very large influx of those youth, as well as in the Roosevelt School District. And I assume that you have that representation also in the city of New York. With the dreamers and those who have been here, they do not have a history of any other place except the United States. But these young children who came unaccompanied, undocumented, have been here less than 24 months. How would you address that should your president decide to say that because they used an address that was really not a legal address or incorrect address, and they are using funds that are somehow or another directed from the federal government into the school district? How could you suggest that we address that issue if those youth are being attempted to be removed? I'm talking about children under the age of 18.
Yeah, I think it's the same. I think you're raising an important piece of the equation. I think it's the same response. That the bottom line, in whatever technicality is used, it still will mean a family torn apart, which none of us who are in public service should be party to. And it means a lot of unintended consequences. I think we need to recognize and just broaden the point. There's 11 or 12 million people in this country. And in fact, for years and years, a lot of Republicans, including Ronald Reagan, tried to find constructive ways to acknowledge that reality and work with it, and a positive, appropriate path forward, rather than try mass deportation. And it is, you know, that we've obviously heard at moments in the campaign, the candidate Trump said some very shocking things, including at one point praising a deportation effort from the 1950s that was a truly mass deportation initiative. But look, it's important they had to go all the way back to the 1950s, that if you go from the 1960s to present, Democrats and Republicans alike did not attempt mass deportation. In fact, President Reagan attempted to find some kind of way to address the issue at its root. I think the answer is the same either way, to try and use every legal recourse we have and to try and support those individual families, because otherwise a lot of families torn apart, a lot of responsibilities that will then fall on localities that aren't able to handle it as families are torn apart.
Thank you. Lastly, just one last question. Oh, I'm out of time. I'll ask you later. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Senator Persaud.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for being here and just so that we can discuss issues affecting New York City in particular. You mentioned that you will be unveiling a new comprehensive program to deal with the homeless population. As we know, last November, our study showed that New York City had the highest number of homeless people ever. Most of the people, particularly the individuals who are living on the streets, are there because of mental illnesses. In this comprehensive plan that you will unveil, will you have an aggressive plan to deal with the mental health issues of the homeless population?
Senator, thank you. And the quick answer is yes, that piece of the equation is already in motion. I think you're pointing out something we have to discuss more in the discussion of homelessness. There are two fronts in this battle. Street homelessness, meaning absolutely permanently, 24-hour permanently homeless folks who, depending on the survey that's taken, typically number between 3,000 and 4,000 people, which is obviously too big a number, but is nowhere near the number of folks in shelter. And when we talk about street homeless, we have to exclude panhandlers who have a home. We have to exclude people who have a shelter but go out during the day and hang out on the street. The real core of that problem you indicate is 3,000 to 4,000 people. They need mental health services. They need substance misuse services. Overwhelmingly, they are there because of one of those two problems. And now, through the Homestead Initiative, the most intensive outreach effort in the history of the city or any city, 700 of them since March have come in and accepted services and not gone back out, which is a very promising sign. On the other side, the other battle is on homelessness that takes the form of folks ending up in shelter. That's today just over 60,000 people. It was higher a few months ago. Thank God has come down a little. Those folks increasingly are families, increasingly because of economic reasons, not mental health or substance reasons, increasingly are working people or people who recently were working. And that has all to do with the growing cost of housing in the city and the lack of good paying jobs. That's what we're focused on now, and so that plan that will come out will particularly focus on the shelter population because the thrust in terms of street homelessness, we're seeing great success with Homestead. We're seeing great success with the Safe Haven program, which is finding smaller facilities that people would come into off the street. We're seeing great success with the NYPD playing a leadership role now, supervising and managing safety and security in our shelters. That's having a real impact. We think that'll help get more people off the street. And we now have the biggest mental health initiative we've ever had, the Thrive program that my wife initiated, which means that we have much more available for people who need mental health services when they do come off the street. We have more options for them now. So I think you'll see in the plan a lot of strength on the street homelessness side, a lot more we have to do and do better on the shelter homelessness side.
Okay, another thing on the homeless. I had the opportunity to tour a site, homeless shelter, a couple of weeks ago, and the underlying complaint that many of them had, it's about getting an apartment. They have vouchers, but the owners and landlords are not willing to accept the vouchers. What is the city doing to stress the landlords to accept the vouchers so that we can remove these people who have the means of paying for an apartment to get into an apartment? And and landlords are also saying that when they accept vouchers, if the client no longer pays their portion of it, they're left without funding. What is the city doing to let the landlords understand that they will not be left high and dry?
Two crucial initiatives. First, I had the honor when I was in the City Council to be the author of legislation which banned discrimination against Section 8 holders and other folks who got income from affordable housing programs. That was very important because a lot of people were being turned away simply because their own government said, you qualify, here's support. They were being turned away literally because they had that support. That is now illegal in New York City. We've intensified enforcement of that. Our Human Rights Commission has been beefed up to be a stronger player in that enforcement. Second, I've met personally with some of the leading landlords who provide housing for folks with Section 8 and other programs. I have told them my personal commitment, which we've stayed true to. I've told them that unlike the past when Advantage was canceled, which I think was the biggest single mistake in the history of homelessness in New York City, and that was April 2011. At that point, there were about 36,000 people in shelter. By the end of the Bloomberg administration, there were 50,000 people in shelter. And the linear connection between the choice to end Advantage and that huge uptick, April 2011 to December 2013, you can see it right there, is because of the loss of Advantage. That also burned a lot of landlords who had been told they could depend on it. When I came in, I met with a lot of them, and my senior leaders administration have met with them to say, we believe in these subsidy approaches, rental assistance approaches. They have worked. They're much better for the taxpayer. Taxpayer saves a huge amount of money with a subsidy rather than somebody end up in shelter. Remember, cost of a family in shelter is now for a year pushing $40,000. A rental subsidy is nowhere near that. So I've made clear to those landlords that we are there for the long haul. And I think they've heard it, but we have more work to do to convince them. What I can say is that under previous administrations, the follow-through with landlords was very shoddy by the government. They had every right to say that the inspections took too long, the reimbursements took too long. We've made major strides in fixing those problems and showing them that we will not let the bureaucracy stand in the way of them getting the resources they deserve.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblyman Castorina.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for being here. Thank you, Chair. I have two very brief questions. The first is with respect to mayoral control of the schools. We had a vote last year. I voted no, which is unusual because I am very much in favor of mayoral control. I think it's a good plan, it's a good model. But what concerns me is that throughout the time that we've had mayoral control in the city of New York, there's been lots of opportunity for people to criticize the way it's been implemented and to talk about the structure, and there's been so many opportunities for the city to hear these concerns. But it doesn't appear as though anything has been done, and particularly my concern is that the board itself essentially operates as a rubber stamp for the mayor. There's no real autonomy. And so I'd like for you to speak a little bit about that. And then the second question relates to the issue that my colleague, Assemblymember Maliotakis, brought up.
On the first point, Assemblyman, I appreciate the question. Assemblyman, there is a reason why so many business leaders in New York City support mayoral control, people who are absolutely adamantly focused on the bottom line and the future of our city and our workforce. Because it's simple, I'll give you the easiest statistic in the world. The day that Mayor Bloomberg achieved mayoral control, which I praised at the time and have praised ever since, our graduation rate was under 50%. Today, our graduation rate is over 70%. That was achieved in less than 15 years, and we are aiming for 80% over the next 8 years. And we're going to get there. Our test scores have continually gone up. We are now essentially equivalent with the rest of the state in terms of where we stand on graduation rate and in many ways getting close on test scores. These are inconceivable ideas. I was a school board member in my communities in Brooklyn in the beginning of the 2000s. If you had told me that we could make that kind of progress this kind of time, I would have told you, wow, you're a dreamer, that's impossible. Right. But it happened because it was a better system. And I commend Mayor Bloomberg, and I commend my colleagues in the business community who have stood with us every step along the way. The bottom line question you raised about autonomy, I can tell you there have been many times when the members of the PEP have rejected a proposal that came forward in the initial discussion, and that it had to be modified to meet their concerns. There have been times when a proposal was agreed upon, then in the debate at the meeting was rejected. Now, with all due respect to my predecessor, you may remember on the question of social promotion, when he had some members vote against his proposal, he removed them the same day. That's not how I have operated. I have said I'm naming good people with diverse views, and I expect them to exercise their judgment, and they've pushed back many a time, and they've voted things down, and they're still in their seat. So I think we've improved upon the dynamics of the original iteration. Remember, and I say this with real respect for my predecessor, I always had disagreements too, but he had his own brand of mayoral control. I've tried to make it more responsive to checks and balances and more responsive to parents as a public school parent myself, which is obviously something that's very different from my predecessor. I lived it with my own kids. I was a school board member. I think we've made progress. But the number one thing I want to say as you consider your vote this year, I think you rightfully demand of us results. The best measures, literally the very best measures, graduation rate and test scores, I can show you chapter and verse why we keep succeeding, and those numbers are going to continue to improve. That's helping kids' lives. But if I didn't have the ability to make things happen quickly, this is a story of pre-K too. The only reason, with your support, we moved pre-K in 2 years from 20,000 kids to 70,000 kids. We could never have done that without mayoral control. It would have taken a decade or more. I just ask you to consider that, because I know, and we come from different parties. That doesn't mean we can't find common ground. I know you want efficient government. I know you want the taxpayers' needs to be respected.
Transparency.
Right. I think we have it with mayoral control in a way we never had in the past.
I'm likewise concerned about the fiscal implications of the City of New York deciding not to follow an executive order of the president. I think it's wrong. I think it's, in fact, I think it would be illegal. Instead of going forward and digging in on the notion of sanctuary cities, why not reach out to the administration and talk about a real pathway to citizenship? Why not focus resources in that direction as opposed to this face-off of sorts, which is certainly only going to create more acrimony, may put the city at risk for losing billions of dollars in federal aid, and also the fact that the notion of a sanctuary city creates really a second-class citizen of sorts, people that have to live in the shadows, people that have to operate in a different economy at times, and it would make more sense, I think, from a humane, from a moral perspective, that we work toward a pathway to citizenship for these undocumented folks. And I wonder if you have had the opportunity to speak with either the president-elect or the president about this issue, and if you plan on doing so.
I would happily engage in that conversation. I began that conversation when he was president-elect and when it was Senator Sessions by describing what we're doing in New York City. I think the term sanctuary city is being used very broadly, and I think we need to reevaluate the understanding of that concept, because it's different in lots of different places, first of all. And secondly, I don't think it gets to the heart of the matter. Back, I think, as far as Ed Koch, New York City made a decision that for public safety reasons alone, we could not create a dynamic where our undocumented immigrants feared talking to the police if they saw a crime or a victim of crime. This is a reality all over this country. When you talk about 11 or 12 million people, we at the local level have to make decisions what to do with the reality as we have received it. We didn't create the immigration reality. It occurred, and now we have to deal with it. What we've seen is consistency by local leaders of both parties. We have seen this for police chiefs all over the country. We've seen it with faith leaders all over the country. The common thread in all regions of the country has been to recognize that if we are cutting off communication between police and immigrants, it has very dangerous ramifications for public safety. And if we end up in a situation where people are deported again, breadwinners deported, parents deported, children left behind, immoral in my view, but more importantly from a practical point of view, not more importantly, but from a practical point of view, of course the taxpayer is going to be left holding the bag, and in a situation that creates huge human pain. So this is very practical. Sanctuary cities as a phrase suggests something ideological. That's why I don't tend to use it. I come to a very practical place. Now, Mayor Koch felt this, Mayor Dinkins felt this, famously Mayor Giuliani felt it, and explicitly continued for 8 full years that concept as a practical matter, and so on. Mayor Bloomberg, and straight through to me. I think we have to look at that and understand, and this is why I talked to President Trump, that that's the reality, and I urged him to talk to the police chiefs of the nation. Commissioner O'Neill has spoken out, Chief Becca in LA has spoken out, many other places. I said, let's take it away from the politicians. Talk to the police chiefs and seek their guidance. I guarantee you they will tell you this is a dangerous situation that cannot be acted on too precipitously. Now, as for the path to citizenship, I agree with you. That's what we should get the conversation back to. There could be differences, but I think, again, you noticed a bipartisan trend up through the last few years of both sides looking for a solution that did involve a pathway to
It's
citizenship.
pragmatic. I agree.
It's in everyone's interest, and I believe in comprehensive immigration reform with a pathway to citizenship. There are plenty of Republicans who have told me privately they do too, different iterations, but they do too. I think we should get the conversation back there. We're going to use everything we got to work with everyone in Washington to reframe the conversation back to that core root problem. But I will tell you that I referred explicitly in my conversation with the President-elect and the then Senator Sessions to the 170 offenses that we fully cooperate with ICE on. And I said, I think this might be a helpful model for getting past it, because I don't think anyone can debate that. I think, and I can have a respectful disagreement with your colleague on whether we've gotten exactly the right 170, but I think we all agree on those 170. Forget if you say there's more you think we should add. I think if you look at those 170, though, you'll find nothing there you would say to take away. I think if that were the concept all over the country, let's get to some unity and bipartisanship. We all should agree on that. And if New York City could do it, anywhere could do it. Then we could also open the door to a better discussion around respecting the kids who qualify for DACA, who really are different than people who made the decision to come here, and a different discussion about what would a pathway to citizenship look for anyone who's here and what we would have to do to qualify for it. That would be healthier. Finally, to your opening point, we do not see this as an act of defiance for defiance's sake. We see an executive order, which you'll remember again, President Obama's immigration action was challenged by dozens of states. Even if I disagree with them, they exercised their rights under the Constitution and they prevailed. We saw an executive order that we thought would make our city less safe, and we also thought it could at maximum be applied very narrowly according to the Supreme Court decision. That's our right and obligation as a city to go and defend our interests and assert that. We do not believe that Justice Roberts' decision would allow it ever to get near the larger pool of money that the city receives. But to say we will accept funding cuts and therefore do something that we think will make us less safe in the bargain, I don't think I'd be serving any people in New York City for that to be my position.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mayor.
Hello, Mayor.
Hey, Senator.
We have
New
two
York.
more people, one Senator Murphy and one over here.
Welcome to Albany. It was great to see you down in Washington
Yes.
for the inauguration.
And congratulations again.
Mayor, last year I asked you to convince me of why I should trust you with mayoral control, billions of dollars, the ability to educate over 1 million kids and give them the opportunity to succeed. In my eyes, you failed. I did not. Now, you're back here 1 year later, asking for 3 years of mayoral control. And I just find this absolutely incredibly astonishing with everything that's going on with you and your administration. Mayor, things have only gotten worse, not, and I repeat, not better for you and your administration. And what I mean by that, which should be of grave concern to every single person in this room, is the 2 sitting grand juries, is the $11 million that you're asking the taxpayers to pay for representation for you and your administration. I say we take the $11 million and we give it to our veterans who represent New York State and the United States. So I'm here again to ask you, convince me why I should vote yes for mayoral control and give you billions of dollars with all the scrutiny that's going on with you and your administration.
Senator, respectfully, I have asserted consistently that we handled all matters of government appropriately, made every effort to cooperate in investigations, provide information that we believe will show that beyond a shadow of a doubt. In terms of the governance of our school system, again, if you're interested in results, I would hope you would be. For 1.1 million children, consistently improved graduation rates, consistently improved test scores should mean something to you. In terms of the needs of taxpayers, don't believe me, believe the business leadership of New York City, which across the board supports mayoral control of education. And they have watched the 3 years of progress that we have added on top of what Mayor Bloomberg started, and they wholeheartedly and energetically support mayoral control, and they come here to Albany to say it, and they've contacted a lot of you to say it. They believe Removal of mayoral control would set New York City back deeply and return to a system, not allegations, Senator, allegations against me that I believe
These aren't
fundamentally.
my allegations.
Senator,
Mayor.
I'm sorry,
These
they're
are not my
allegations.
This is at another whole level
Senator,
besides me.
Senator, allegations are one thing. In the previous system of educational governance, they weren't just allegations. There was proof of corruption and chaos year after year after year. That's what Mayor Bloomberg decided to break us out of, and I commended him at the time. And that is a much, much better system. So you could vote against something that has been proven to work. As I mentioned, in less than 15 years, graduation rate going from under 50% to over 70%. You can vote against something the entire business establishment believes is good for the children of New York City. You can vote against something that philosophically I would hope you would agree with. Because you don't like me or you don't agree with me, that's your business. But this is more than about any of us. This is about a decision on how we're going to govern our schools and whether we're going to serve 1.1 million children or not. If you want to vote for the old system of chaos and corruption,
How many kids
that's your
go on
choice.
to college?
Wait a minute. I'll be the first to say we had a school system under the previous governance structure that failed our children in terms of graduation, failed our children in terms of getting to college. We have said openly that we need to retool this school system in so many ways to increase not only graduation rate, but college readiness, which is unacceptably low. But this entire school system, we have only begun the work of retooling it. Full-day pre-K is part of it. Training all our teachers on a higher level is part of it. If you prefer to vote for a system that was typified by chaos and corruption, that's your choice. But I can tell you that people in New York City will tell you, especially our business leadership, that you would be voting to take us backwards.
Well, I don't believe it has gotten any better.
Well, then
Under your
these
administration,
facts, I don't know how you can.
I'd like to know what your
Do you want-
graduation rate
do you
was.
actually
How
deny-
many people go on to graduation?
Wait. You
What kind
deny
of careers they
graduation?
come out with? Are they coming back to New York City?
Senator,
These are
you would
some
literally.
simple answers that I'd like answered.
If you're saying the State Department of Education is misreporting graduation rates around the state, then you should take that up with the State Department of Education. These are not my numbers, they're their numbers. Graduation rate and test scores, those are things you will learn from the State Department of Education. They have made clear the steady progress we've made in New York City under 2 administrations. Those are matters of fact.
Well, like I said last year, it was a matter of trust. And
It's
the
a
trust
system,
factor,
Senator.
excuse me,
It's a
I'm
system.
talking, the trust factor is just something that everybody in this room and everybody in New York State should be worried about. And you did not. You did not convince me last year, and just the little dialogue that we've had this year is just still not convincing.
Senator,
to
you
me or
obviously have a
myself,
bone to pick.
okay?
You obviously have a bone to pick. And if you're really going to vote for a system of chaos and corruption, that's your business, and people will remember that vote. But I'm telling you, if you are denying an increase in graduation rate, denying an increase in test scores, denying
I did not say anything
that
of the
mayoral
sort.
control
All I wanted
education
was the
started by a
statistics that you should have provided for
Republican
us. That's
mayor.
all I asked for.
If you think a system started by a Republican mayor and backed up by the business community in New York City is a bad system, I look forward to you having that conversation with the business community. I think they'll feel differently about your view.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you. To close, Mr. Carroll.
Good afternoon, Mayor de Blasio. First, I want to applaud you and the City Council for your leadership on the plastic bag issue. Conservation is very important, and not so coincidentally, I have my reusable bag because I don't leave home without it.
Well done, Assemblyman.
My first question is about voting reforms here in New York State. I'm glad that you support same-day registration and early voting, but do you support shortening the time period a voter has to wait to change their party enrollment, which in some cases can be 11 months?
Assemblyman, and I just want to note, thank you for your service because you are my Assemblyman in Brooklyn, and I welcome you to your new role. I think we need same-day registration, early voting, electronic poll books, a series of reforms that are all, all over the nation. One of the only state that has none of those. I think that we rightfully have a system that recognizes party membership and respects it in the primary process, but I think our deadlines are too long. I would be comfortable with a much shorter time period, a few months or whatever might be appropriate. Because I think people honestly, especially in a very dynamic political environment, make a decision sometimes that they are changing. I've certainly met people who have made decisions personally to change their party affiliation, go from independent to party member or from one party to another for very real reasons. But enough of a time gap to discourage what exists now in some states, which is in the morning you're a Democrat, you sign up to be Republican for just that day, just that caucus or primary, and by evening you're back to being a Democrat. I don't think that's fair. I think then people are trying to game each election and have an impact that really is not about the broader views of the people, but trying to get inside and manipulate the specific process. General elections, obviously, everyone gets to vote equally, but in primaries, I think party identifications do matter. But we shouldn't create such a barrier that people, like a year away, I think is our current reality, is just too onerous and doesn't reflect the realities of human decision-making.
My next question is about the mansion tax that you proposed. Is this tax in addition to the current tax on $1 million home sales, or is it taking its place? And go
ahead.
It's in addition.
It's in addition. And what is the rate?
The current rate's 2.5%. It's the marginal rate at that level will be 2.5%. So the marginal rate right now is 1.4%.
Yeah.
Okay.
My next question is a question that both myself and my colleague, Assemblymember Richardson, care deeply about, and it's about area and median income, and whether you've spoken with our federal representatives about
Senator Young, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for being so patient and putting up with all of us. I'll be actually very brief. The reason I wanted to go last is I wanted to make sure I didn't go over things that people had already asked you. So you know my position on the plastic bag thing. You don't need to hear it. You know my position on some other issues. I am anxiously awaiting the new policy on community notification that you'll be rolling out in a couple of weeks, because we are all very concerned about the homeless issue and how it affects our communities. I do want to speak very briefly about ACS. And I want to acknowledge publicly the changes in the administration under your mayorship. I've been through 4 mayors with this agency in the 26 and a half years that I've been involved in ACS, and I don't think it gets stressed publicly enough, the commitment of your administration. When I disagree with you, I have no problem saying so, you know that, but you are putting real resources and efforts into this agency, and I don't think that the media properly portrays what goes on a day-to-day basis with the frontline CPS staff, and the fact that unless you've knocked on someone's door in the middle of the night and convinced them to hand you their child, you really don't understand how difficult this job is. So I do think it's important that we get that out there, and I have recently met with your administration at ACS to talk about some changes where I'm going to propose here in Albany, legislative changes, to undo what I think over the years has been some unnecessary requirements on the CPS staff that take them away from their core mission of identifying risks that exist in homes so that they can properly assess more quickly and provide the right type of services. So I'm going to pursue that here. I'm going to work very closely with your administration to help make that possible, because I think we all have the same goal, whether it's providing enough funding to the administration, whether it's the commitment to protecting children, keeping families together where it's appropriate, and separating them where it's appropriate. I will say, though, I have had several conversations with some frontline CPS staffers, and I have heard from more than one that they have been overruled by judges when they have requested a remand in court. That is a departure from past practice. It is one that concerns me greatly, because again, the decision should not be to keep families together when all indications are that they should not be kept together. So I'm going to work very closely, I think, with the current administration there. Whoever you bring in, hopefully they will be someone who understands the complexities of New York City's child welfare system, its vast nonprofit structure that supports it, and you know how hard it is to protect children in this city. But I just want to say publicly, you have made the commitment that other mayors didn't, and I don't think that that gets said enough. So,
well, Senator, I really appreciate that, and I indicated earlier you're one of the people in this state who understands these issues the best. I know you've devoted your life to it. And I appreciate your acknowledgement of the investments we've made and the focus. I also would say that, you know, my predecessors came from different backgrounds. This was a lot of work I did in my career focused on the issues of children. So I feel this very personally. I think it's important, you and I are both frustrated when someone who is trained to understand the danger of children asks a judge to remove a child as an act of caution. It's not forever, but to avoid an immediate danger, and a judge says no. You know, I respect, of course, the division of powers in our government, but it's very frustrating because I'm a believer that you do the safe thing, you do the, you know, the abundance of caution thing in every case involving a child's life. And we need to ask our judges to think long and hard before turning down a request that professionals say is in the interest of protecting a child. But on your earlier point about the work we could do to clarify the role of our protected workers, I'm very open and appreciate your suggestions. Look, I think a historical thing that also does not get noted is that every administration has grappled with these issues. They're some of the most challenging issues in public service. We're talking about broken families by any definition, and lots of social ills that have come into a family. We're talking about things we can't even see sometimes. You know this from your work, as we've often seen, for example, quote-unquote boyfriend coming into the house that we don't even know is there, who is often the perpetrator. We are constantly trying to figure out how to improve this work. To the credit of my predecessors, look, I had lots of disagreements with Mayor Giuliani, but after the death of Elisa Izquierdo, he brought Nick Scopetta in, he made major changes. But he had to learn the hard way what we were not doing well enough. Mayor Bloomberg, after the death of Nix Mary Brown, made major changes, many of which I agreed with. But but he had to learn what we were missing. Good people served as commissioners. No one fully cracked the code on everything we had to do. And I learned a lot in a parallel reality with NYPD. Working with Bill Bratton, working with Jimmy O'Neill, seeing how every day they're trying to figure out how to do things better than they did in the past. ACS has been going that same route but not getting credit for it. We still have more to do. There's no question we have more to do. But I'll tell you one thing, our new commissioner is going to have full support, have the resources that he or she needs, the deeper involvement in the NYPD. I think that's going to make a world of difference, and we're going to keep working to get it right.
I certainly hope so. And I also, I think it's worth noting that the agency that I went to work for 26 years ago is not the same agency that exists today. I don't think the public and even the media takes the time to recognize that the majority of the children and families are not directly supervised by ACS. They are supervised by a nonprofit structure of voluntary agencies who have direct contact with these families on a regular basis. And that is a structure that is understaffed, overstretched. The turnover rate in those agencies is, at astronomical levels, and that also hinders the ability to provide for many of these families. And we need to strengthen that sector of the service provision as well. And so, again, I look forward to working with this, with your administration and with this, this sector of our, very important work that we do in government. So I want to thank you.
Thank you. And quick response that we are going to be we have been investing more in preventative services than any previous administration, but you're making a key point. The investment's great, but we have to make sure the quality is there. We have to make sure the staff are actually retained. We have to figure out the kinds of things that will constantly improve the quality. You're right. We can't do it without. We have faith-based partners, community-based partners, all sorts of organizations that do what government could never do on its own. We have to constantly help improve their work at the same time, and that's going to take real focus and real investment, but we're committed to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it.
That's it.
Thank you, chairs. Appreciate it.
I'm going to get beat up by some people, but I'm going to take it. No. No,